Hello? Hello? Oh, there we are. We've got our in-house sound. We are trying to record this training. We've done lots of trainings and we've never recorded it so that we have an actual recording to send to people who, maybe missed part of, oh, there we go. Who maybe missed part of the training before, or like maybe their spouse couldn't come and wants to catch up on it or something like that. So that is what we are working on, and I think we just got it. Are we good, Jake? I heard it from my computer, the sound. Okay, cool. All right. Hey, welcome, you guys. Thanks for coming to MVM Training. I know it's a good chunk of your Saturday, and that's kind of a sacrifice, but we really appreciate you being here. We have another person who's going to be joining us here in a few minutes. She's going to be a little bit late. We had another group of people who are also going to be able to come, and they had to cancel at the last minute, which is super sad, but that's okay. I'm so thankful you guys are here. A couple housekeeping things. Jake is going to come down, and he's actually going to get us started. My name's Maddie Boer. I'm the executive director here for our Mansfield chapter of My Village Ministries, and we are super excited you're here. If you've never been here before, you go straight out these doors to the right to that hallway, and there are bathrooms down that hallway, okay? So if you need to use the bathroom, this is very laid back. So if you have questions, if you have comments, shout it out. We love the back and forth that we get to have with you guys. That kind of helps make this training what it is. We also have water, coffee, fruit, bars, donuts, all that in the back. Get up at any time and help yourself to that. You don't have to wait for permission or anything like that. So help yourselves. And I think Jake is coming down here. He is going to get us started today. Another thing that we ran into, which is kind of funny, not funny, we were joking that the enemy is always after our MVM trainings. Every time we have one, there's always something that goes wrong or a glitch. So we could not get our projectors to show all of our slides today. So we do have most of our videos though, which is awesome. And in you guys' packets, you actually have the written form of all the slides. So you should be good. You guys have all the information. We just won't have the cool slides up here. So I'm sorry about that. And here is Jake.
Hello. Oh, I even get a round of applause. Wow. You guys, I'm going to move this because I'm already short enough. I don't need to sit. Hey, thank y'all for being here. I know Maddie already said that, but we're so glad that y'all are here to just learn about what it is, this ministry that we've been talking about. And a lot of you have gotten little tidbits of information, but not the full picture of what My Village Ministries is and how we are actively serving the Mansfield and Richland County community. We are hoping that by time we are done with this training, this informational session, that you'll have more answers than questions. But if not, hopefully we can answer those questions too. But we're really glad that you guys are here. I want to start things off by just giving a little bit of an intro on what My Village Ministries is and the need of it a little bit. And so I don't know if you guys know, has anyone had any experience with the foster care system, with children's services or anything like that? Yeah, a little bit of experience. So you guys know a little bit. So Maddie and I, we adopted our 3 children from foster care, and so we got to experience the foster care system pretty intricately through that whole experience. But also, Maddie is a social work. She has her master's in social work, worked with numerous agencies that were involved with foster care and children's services and all of that, and also worked as a school social worker for a good while. And so we have gotten to experience the foster care system. And one thing is certain, and even children's services, social workers, all of that, they will admit the system is not perfect, right? It is easy to criticize, but the fact of the matter is, the system, if it worked perfectly, would be amazing. But unfortunately, we have more need than we have the people to meet the need. And so the foster care workers, social workers, all of that, they're very overworked. They're underpaid. They are definitely understaffed. And so that is why we see a lot of the holes that we see in the foster care system. I want to share some numbers with you that I believe they may be in your packet. And if not, feel free to jot these down. But in case you don't know fully the depth of the need that we have here, In 2021, obviously we're in 2022, so the statistics haven't been released, but in 2021, there were 6,700-ish calls made to Child Protective Services in Richland County. So 6,700 calls made to Child Protective Services to report something that was not right. Children that were in danger, children that were not being adequately cared for. 6,700 calls made. Of those 6,700 calls, 1,158 cases were investigated, and cases were established for those children in question. So 1,158, and I'm going to break those down and let you know what those cases were for. So at that point in time when the investigation happened, a case was opened, and Child Protective Services actively began investigating the validity of these claims. Of those 1,158, 398 of those cases were because of neglect. 325 of the cases were because of physical abuse. 146 were because of sexual abuse to the children. 62 cases were because of emotional maltreatment. 62 cases were because of substance dependency from the parent. And 165 cases were family in need of assistance. So that's whenever CPS investigates and they realize that the parents or the caretakers, they just don't have the support that they need. They don't have jobs. They don't have the financial resources. So not necessarily that children are actively being harmed, but the family doesn't have the support that they need. So I broke it down and I added all those numbers up. And 687 of those cases, the parents were not physically harming the child. These are the cases of neglect where maybe the children don't have food to eat every day. And so CPS recognizes that as neglect. This is cases of emotional maltreatment. Maybe the parents aren't being there emotionally for the children. They are being maybe demeaned and yelled at and maybe cussed at, things like that. There were also those cases of family in need of assistance where CPS investigated and they realized maybe it's not that this is a bad parent, but the parent just doesn't have what they need to parent well. And so 687 of those cases, the children were not physically being harmed. And I don't want to undervalue the importance of the emotional protection of the children, but that is 60% of the cases that Child Protective Services investigated where the children were not being physically harmed. They weren't being sexually abused. They weren't being physically abused, but maybe the parents just weren't adequately caring for their children because their fridges were empty or the parents weren't around enough. So that we believe as My Village Ministries that since that 60% number, that is more than half of these cases where children aren't being taken care of, not necessarily because the parents are quote unquote bad parents, but this is parents who, maybe it's a single mom who she has to work 3 jobs just to keep food on the table for her kids. Well, when you're working 3 jobs as a single parent, that means you're not going to be home much. And if you don't have the connections to have babysitters all the time, maybe you're leaving your 8-year-old kid at home alone, which yes, that is dangerous, but in that parent's mind, I guarantee you, that's the best solution that they could come up with. Now, it's not the perfect solution, but a lot of these times, parents are doing the very best that they can with the resources that they have. We believe that MVM, My Village Ministries, if we were able to step in and fill that gap for these families, we would see these numbers drop drastically because all of those cases were opened. 1,158 cases were established. In most of those cases, the children were removed from their homes. Even if there was a loving, caring parent that just didn't have the resources that they needed. They didn't have the people that could babysit their kids. They had to work 3 jobs. They went into the hospital to get medical treatment, and they had no one to watch their kids, so Child Protective Services took them. These are all cases where if My Village Ministries were able to step in and build a support system for that family, then maybe we could support them enough so that Children's Services wouldn't have to get involved and remove the kids from their parents' care. like I said, that is 60% of the cases that were not physically abusive, that were not sexually abusive. And in those cases, we believe that with the adequate support, parents would be able to care for the kids the way that God wants them to, the way that they want to, if they had the support system that they need. And so here in a little bit, we're going to talk about exactly how My Village Ministries does that. But we're going to work through some other areas first. But our whole premise is that parents most of the time are not choosing to be bad parents. They don't hate their kids. They don't want to hurt their kids. But when we have a lack of support, sometimes we make poor decisions, right? I know in my stress, I have made poor decisions before. And when a parent feels like they have no options, when they feel like they have no support, they do what they think is best for the kids, and sometimes it's not the healthiest thing, but it might be the best that they can do right now. And so we're going to tell you a little bit about how My Village Ministries can step in and provide that support for parents, for grandparents, for family members who may be caring for children. So you're going to learn a little bit about that, and you're also going to learn a little bit about trauma, a little bit about poverty and compassion. And hopefully our goal would be that by the end of this, you would know a little bit more, not just about who we are and how we're serving the community, but also maybe we as a whole will be better equipped to step into those hard situations and minister to people that are in poverty, that are in crisis, and provide for them the care that God wants to give them so that we can be the answer to the prayers of this community. And I didn't necessarily mention that. Kenzie's going to come up in just one second, but My Village Ministries came to be because we saw the need, the holes in the system where 1,158 cases are being opened, and that's a low number. Last year, the numbers were even higher. We're actually getting better, which is good, but that's still a striking number. And a good number of children had to be removed from the care of their parents. And we saw that as an organization, and we saw that and formed this organization so that we could step in and provide for those needs and try to fill those gaps to try to prevent as many kids as possible from having to be removed from the care of their parents by caring for the children and caring for the parents. So that's just a little bit of background. Kenzie's going to come, and she's going to share with you a little bit of behind the scenes of how children are assessed in terms of like what the need is and all of that kind of stuff, not just by My Village Ministries, but also by like Children's Services when they get involved. So go ahead, Ken.
So I'm going to go a little bit off script. I just feel like Maddie kind of shared a little bit earlier. We've had people cancel. We've had tech issues. And I just feel like we just really want to pray over this training and everybody here today. So if you guys will bow your heads with me. Lord, we are so thankful for each and every person here in this room today and everybody joining us online, God. We are so thankful for the ability to be able to do your work here in Richland County, God, but also expanding the work and doing this work for your kingdom in your name, because this is what we are called here to do today. So I just pray that you clear our hearts, clear our minds, give our staff the words to say to just train here today and talk about our hearts and MVM, Lord. But I also just pray that you soften everyone's hearts today and give them a clear call on how you would like them to be involved with MVM. Thank you for blessing us thus far, and thank you for blessing us here in the future and today with the people who are here. Amen. Thank you guys for going off script with me a little bit. So I wanted to talk about ACEs. So ACEs, if you guys open your folders, the second sheet on your right, I think, is going to be the ACEs study. So this is something that psychologists came up with as a research tool to study the effects of childhood trauma and the effects later on in life. So if you guys don't mind actually just taking a few minutes to either look it over, or you guys can assess it for yourselves based on your own experiences. It's up to you. But we'll give about 2 or 3 minutes, and I'll come back and kind of talk about what this study is. So feel free to continue working through that sheet if you're still looking through the questions and working through that paper. But to explain what the ACEs study is, it is a study by psychologists who look at the impact between childhood maltreatment and trauma and see the impact later on in life for those adults who did not have any prevention or restitution for that trauma. And so research has found that these experiences that these kids go through, the trauma that you're seeing just on that sheet alone, it doesn't cover everything, but even just having a score of 1 can lead to higher risk later on in life. But what they did find in this research is that when you have a score of 4 or higher, that can lead to a 10 times greater risk for drug use and suicide. It can also lead to a 3 times greater risk for heart disease and stress-related diseases, and they are 32 times a greater risk for learning and behavioral problems. And so just looking through all those things, all of these different experiences that these children have when they're growing up, you'll learn later on today how important it is for childhood development. And when that's impacted by trauma and these adverse experiences, it can really affect as they grow and develop. Now, you taking this quiz, if you had a score of 1 or 4 or higher, that does not mean in any sense that you are going to have these problems. It's just saying you're at a greater risk for these. The great point to all of this is that we're going to talk later on today, spoiler alert, that there is resolution for this trauma. There is ways that we can go about and prevent, but also heal the trauma that these kids have gone through and experienced through trauma-informed care and different things like that we have learned about trauma through psychologists and studies. So we just kind of wanted to start off this training by giving you an idea of some experiences that these kids have gone through, but also when taking this questionnaire, this is how a lot of caseworkers and social workers will see the different experiences that they've gone through and what their risk is through that score. And then next we're gonna have Jake come on up here and talk about poverty and compassion.
Hey y'all, before we talk about poverty and compassion, there's a short video that I want to show you to check out. This gentleman, I don't know if you've ever heard of the book, Toxic Charity. It's a very good book. The idea is, behind this book, is that oftentimes, especially those of us who are privileged, who are living in, middle class, upper middle class America, we, as the church, like to go and do things like short-term mission trips where we go and we serve in an area, and we get this idea that we are doing so much good, which is true, but oftentimes the mentality of us helping can actually end up hurting the people that we think we're helping in the long term because we're not setting them up for success in the future. We come in and we think that we can just buy their success by giving them $20, and we don't actually make any lasting change. And so one of the gentlemen who masterminded that book, he is a Christian guy who he teaches and does all sorts of speaking and cool stuff. He's got this video kind of helping rethink this idea of compassion and poverty. So we're going to check out that video, and then
not too far from here there's a restaurant my family likes to go to, and every single time that we pull up into the parking lot, there's a lady who approaches our car asking us for money. And on the surface of it, she's not dressed very well. It's clear that she isn't eating very well and she's hungry. And so the symptom is a lack of material things. She doesn't have adequate clothing and adequate food. We in the West, in North America, are fundamentally materialist people. We think of the world in materialistic terms. We think of poverty as a lack of material things. We think the solution to poverty is to provide material things for people. But it's so interesting, if you ask poor people around the world what is poverty, they define it in very different ways. If you ask the poor, they will say things like, to be poor is to be full of shame, is to be embarrassed, is to be humiliated, is to feel less than human, is to feel like you're not really part of society. The poor describe their poverty, in material terms, but in far more psychological and social terms than most North Americans do. What the Bible teaches us is that God is fundamentally a relational being. He relates Father, Son, and Holy Ghost to himself. And he's wired us in his image. We're wired for relationship as well. We are fundamentally relational beings. And what the scriptures teach is that each human being has been given 4 key relationships that define really what it means to be human. Human beings are wired for a relationship with God, with ourselves, our self-image, our self-concept, a relationship with others, and finally a relationship with the rest of creation. And when these 4 relationships are working properly, we experience humanness in the way that God intended. Unfortunately, the fall of humanity into sin has broken and distorted those key relationships. That woman in the parking lot who doesn't have adequate clothing and food, that inadequacy in material things is rooted in something far deeper, the brokenness that she's experiencing in her relationships with God, self, others, and the rest of creation. So as we try to help her, we've got to come out of that framework saying her lack of things is really a symptom of something far deeper. We've got to get down to those deeper things to really help her. What I'm starting to realize, what the Lord is showing me, is that once we define poverty as being rooted in broken relationships, it's not just that lady in the parking lot who's lacking food who's poor, but that I too am poor. I've got 2 cars in the driveway, I've got a nice house. I'm not materially poor, but there's profound brokenness in my life. I'm not experiencing all that God intended for me. And so what I'm discovering as the director of the Chalmers Center and in my work with the materially poor is that I actually can't fix them. And I used to think that I could. I can't fix them. Only Jesus Christ can fix them. And I can't fix me. Only Jesus Christ can fix me. And so poverty alleviation isn't so much about me putting food in the hands of that beggar lady, as much as it's taking her hand and saying to her, I'm a beggar too, but I found the bread of life, and he can heal you and he can heal me too. Not too far from here, there's a restaurant my family likes.
What do y'all think about that video? What do you think about those points raised, that concept, the mindset of poverty when viewed that way? Do you guys have any thoughts about that video? What that gentleman was saying? What's popping into your mind? Yeah. 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 Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I agree 100%. And I don't think he was negating the importance of material resources. I think that he was correcting the understatement of the spiritual stuff. I agree 100% that it has to be both and. Like, if you look at even, this basic psychological concept of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like, we can't even consider spiritual stuff until we've got our safety taken care of. If we feel like, man, I don't even know where I'm going to sleep tonight. I don't even know if I'm going to live through the day because I'm so hungry and I'm like at wit's end. You need to meet that physical need. The hunger pangs need to disappear so that you can begin having a conversation about what's next, what's better. That's a really great point. What else do you guys think about this idea? Was this new to you? Is this, what else? What other thoughts do we have? Yeah. Absolutely. For me, growing up, always learned to view poverty in terms of material resources. The people that are asking for money, well, they're just struggling because they don't have money. So if they can just have money, then all of their problems will disappear. But now as an adult, as someone who is dealing with more complex problems than I was when I was 10 years old, I realize it's not that simple. Money, like Sandy said, does not solve everything. In fact, there's a lot of people who have a lot of money who still have a lot of problems, right? The number in your bank account doesn't make your problems disappear. Sometimes it even heightens the issue, especially if you're living in like relational and spiritual poverty. Then no amount of money is ever going to pull you out of that. If you're still living completely alone, isolated from community, you're still going to feel lost. You're still going to feel an emptiness because you don't have one of those things that God created you to have: community with Him, community with others. So any other thoughts? I don't want to just brush past this. If there are any, if there's any wrestling with this concept that we can talk about. Yeah, Pam. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And there are a lot of different people groups that fall into that category. We see, like you said, veterans that come back from a conflict that suddenly everything that they were trained for, everything that their life has revolved around for the past number of years, all of that disappears. Their community that they had, being a member of the armed forces, that disappears because now you re-enter your home and you're expected to live normal life, and you have all of this trauma that you're dealing with that no one is helping you get through. Suddenly it's like, how do you live normal life that way? So that makes sense. Another big people group is people struggling with addiction. People who are not struggling with addiction will never fully understand the mind of a person struggling with addiction because we are not there. And scientists and psychologists do their very best to understand it, but substances warp the brain. They change the synapses in your brain, they change the way you think, and quite literally you become physically dependent on those things. And so while somebody is struggling with that and they feel like no one is relating with them, no one is helping them, it is very hard for them to be a part of a community. They become ostracized. They get pushed on the outside. Many times addicts get kicked out of their homes, you know. I've had members of my family get kicked out of their home because they were struggling with substance abuse. And so when something like that happens, your support system, your structure begins to crumble. And then where do you turn for that support? Where do you turn for help to answer those questions, to figure out how to navigate this life? So yeah, I think, Pam, you hit the nail on the head. The isolation and without the help getting through those needs, I think that's a big issue. Brittany, yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yep. I think that's huge. And I think that is a huge piece of compassion itself, is recognizing that I don't fully understand where you're coming from. I would like to. Like, will you help me understand how you got to where you are? And so often we, like that the gentleman was saying in the video, we see somebody who has a need and we are moved by compassion. But if we don't let it fully play out, our compassion looks like, hey, I'm going to give you $20. God bless you. But like, coming alongside the person and say, man, hey, I'm going to give you like a meal. I'd love to sit down with you in Wendy's over a burger, and I would love for you to tell me about your life. Like, it must be really hard. Like, I see you out here in front of Kroger asking for money every week. Like, help me know how you got here. What's your life like? You know, I think understanding that we don't understand is a big piece. Yeah, Andrew. Yeah. 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 Yeah, man. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. 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 Absolutely. Yeah. And it just makes you think about, like Sandy was saying a moment ago, like even Jesus, he fed the hungry. You know, he healed the leper. And then, you know, in those moments, he was able to tell them, like, hey, your sins are forgiven. Go and sin no more. And he gets them through that struggle that they're going through, and then he imparts the wisdom of God on them. And I think that's hugely important. Like you said, that marriage of faith and works, both are important, and both necessitate the other. And one without the other quickly becomes empty or not as fruitful as it could be otherwise. I think that's really important. I also, I want to hit this issue real quick, and then we're going to jump into some other things. But that mindset a couple of you have mentioned of, like, we are raised to believe in America that if people are struggling, it's because they did that to themselves, right? You see somebody who is without a job, and you're like, well, look harder. You see somebody who is homeless, and you say, well, go get a job. You see somebody who is addicted to drugs, and you say, shouldn't have used drugs in the first place. And on some degree, there may be some truth in that, but let me just tell you, as somebody who has a drug addict for a brother, and I've talked to him in his moments of sobriety, and I've asked him, like, man, what were you thinking, you know? He can promise me his intent was never that he would become dependent on these drugs. And in fact, the whole reason he's hooked on drugs is because he got into a bad car accident and they prescribed him opiates without actually talking to him about how to manage it and how to wean him off of those pills. And so now, years and years and years later, he's addicted to heroin. And because that's a lot cheaper than buying Oxycontin, you know? And so he never intended to get hooked on drugs. He had a physical need, and because there was a lack of Jesus, he turned to a physical, a different meeting of that physical need that he had. He turned to narcotics. And so the same is true with just about every single person that is in one of those situations. You can look at someone who's homeless and be like, well, you should have made better choices. But until we actually get to know their life and to know what were those choices and why they were forced to make them, it is really unfair for us to point a finger. And instead, I think the answer is what he was talking about, coming alongside of those people and saying, man, I can't imagine what it would be like being out here day after day, asking for food and relying on the compassion of others to survive. I want to buy you a meal and help me understand how you got to this point. And I think there's something beautiful in that. And I think that again, the heart of Jesus is all over that, because that's what he was about. He saw a need. He was on his way to heal somebody when he felt somebody touch his robe. and he turned in the middle of his emergency, and he spoke to the woman who had had a bleeding problem for years, and he healed her. He was all about meeting needs, but then meeting the spiritual need after the physical need. So I think the heart of Jesus is all over this. Any other thoughts on this video before I move on to this next point real quick? I don't want to sell you guys short. I know that you guys have great thoughts. So really quick, we're talking about poverty, and not to put anybody in a box, but just a sociological study of poverty and just the psychological study of poverty will reveal that there are certain attributes, certain characteristics, certain ways of living that have become the norm for people who are living in poverty. And I believe some of these are in your folder that you got, but some mindsets that are common in poverty as you are potentially going to be rubbing shoulders with people who are in these impoverished situations. And I hope that you are, because that's where Jesus would have us be, rubbing shoulders with the down and out and the least of these and all of that. And especially for those of you that do choose to get invested in My Village Ministries, a large part of the people that we serve are coming from poverty backgrounds. They're actively living in poverty in one way or another. So this will help us hopefully understand them a little bit better. Some poverty mindsets that are common. They're very much short game thinkers. For those of us who are like middle class to upper class Americans, we like to think 5-10 years down the road. We're thinking, okay, if I pay an extra $200 on my mortgage, I can pay it off 10 years quicker, and then I will turn my 30-year mortgage into a 20-year mortgage, and then I'll free up money. And, we think long term. We think about, okay, if I can invest a little extra money in my 401k, then I will really be set, and I'll be able to retire at 55 instead of 60. Or whatever. We're thinking long term. We are thinking our investments. We are thinking, you know what, if I sock away a little money now, maybe we can take a vacation to Florida this summer and we can really get away and have fun as a family. Versus people who are living in poverty, they're thinking about this afternoon. They're not thinking about, how can I save money so I can go on that Daytona Beach vacation? They're thinking about, how can I scrape up enough money so that I can go and get a sandwich from McDonald's today? Where is the best place I can stand to ask for money that people will actually give me money? How can I get this infection on my foot taken care of cheaply because I don't have the money for medical care? They're thinking about right now. They're thinking about today. Seldom they're thinking about tomorrow. It happens, but at the most, people in poverty, they're thinking about next week. They're not thinking about next year and the next 5 years. They also, again, they live in the present. That's something that goes along with the short-term mindset. They are living for today. They don't necessarily think about the repercussions of their actions. They do what strikes them in the moment because they've gotten so used to thinking short term. They're not thinking, okay, well, if I go into this gas station and I try to steal this candy bar because I am so hungry, that could get me in trouble with the law, that could land me in jail, that could earn me fines that I can't afford to pay. They're thinking about, okay, well, right now I'm hungry. There are candy bars, and that shopkeeper looks like he's not paying attention. I should go and take that thing. They're thinking about the right now. Folks in poverty have gotten used to this mentality of, what can you do for me? Because their relationships are highly transactional. They've gotten used to people not caring for them unless they can provide something for them. And so they're very suspicious of others. They think that there are strings attached to everything. So they enter into relationships with this idea of, okay, I'm going to befriend you, but what do I get out of it? Versus people who are not living in poverty, we will have relationships that we get nothing out of, and that is okay sometimes. We will even mentor people and invest in people knowing full well that person is never going to pour back into my life because it's a mentorship relationship. Folks that are in poverty are very much thinking, well, I've got a limited amount of time and resources, so if I'm investing them, I want a return on that investment. What can you do for me if I am investing my time and energy into you? They very largely have a victim mentality because they have been told over and over and over again that where they are at is their fault. And so as a defense mechanism, folks in poverty have largely adopted this idea of like, well, the world is out to get me and this is unfair. And so every time something happens to them, they're just like, it's my darn luck again. I ran into this person's car and the police are just out to get me. And so I've got this massive fine to pay because they're just trying to get me. They're come and get me. The same is true if you talk with folks in poverty who have cases open with Child Protective Services. The majority of them will tell you, man, they're just out to take my kids. They are after my children and they are trying to ruin our family because they've gotten so used to being told that everything is their fault. As a defense mechanism, when you hear that, you start to say, well, if I get told that long enough, I need to start protecting myself and making myself the victim. So it's not my fault. It's actually the world is out to get me. A really great thing about folks in poverty, something that is a learned coping mechanism, they are very resourceful. These are the people that you will see in an 85 hoopty that looks like if you breathe on it, it's going to fall apart, but somehow they have managed to duct tape that car together so that it will last longer than my Honda will, because they have just learned how to make do with what they have. They're the people who come up with ingenious workarounds to systems and structures. They're very resourceful, and they can problem solve better than most middle-class Americans, because typically in middle class, if we have a problem, we throw money at it till it goes away. People in poverty that don't have money to throw at it, they will figure out other ways that they can meet that need. Another thing about people in poverty, they use dough to distract. These are the people that they have been, homeless, or they have been living paycheck to paycheck, and they get their $3,000 tax return, and the first thing that they do is go buy a big screen TV. Or the first thing they do is they take a vacation out of the state, because we who are more privileged, we would say, man, you should invest that money. You should pay off some of that debt that you have so you'll have more money month to month. But in their mind, they're like, I need something to distract me from my horrible circumstances. Life normally is pretty bad. And so when somebody hands me a $3,000 check, you better believe I'm going to spend it on myself, because I need to feel better about my circumstances right now. And if any of us were to live in those circumstances day after day, week after week, month after month, there's a good chance that we might make some of those same decisions. We might receive a $3,000 check and blow it, playing slots or whatever, because we think I can turn this $3,000 into $15,000 if luck's on my side. Because when you're living in that situation, again, we're thinking about right now. And then the last thing, most folks who are in poverty are generous to a fault. They may not have much money, but what money that they do have, they hold it loosely because they know what it's like to have little. And so I have seen folks that are begging for money on the street corner take that money and turn it around and give it to somebody else who's begging for money on the other street corner. Because whereas we hold on to our stuff and our possessions tightly sometimes, folks who don't have much, they tend to hold on to it very loosely, and they will see someone else in need and say, brother, I know what that's like. I just earned $20. Here's 10 of it because I know what it's like to be in your shoes. So we can even learn a little bit from folks who've been living in poverty. There's a saying that I believe is in your folder, and that saying says, you give once, you elicit appreciation. You give twice, you create anticipation. You give 3 times, you create an expectation. Give 4 times, it becomes entitlement. You give 5 times, you establish dependency. And so again, this is not to downplay how good it can be to meet physical needs and to provide financially. But this is that concept that you give a man a fish, he eats for a day, but you teach a man to fish and he eats for a lifetime. If you just keep giving and giving and giving with no relationship and no teaching of like, hey, let me help you navigate the healthcare system. Let me help you figure out how to apply for welfare, how to apply for Medicaid, how to whatever. Let me help you find affordable housing. If we just throw money at something without helping them learn the skills they need, then we create over time this dependency on us like we are their Savior. But we who know Christ know that we are not their Savior. There is only one. And so it's important for us to be doing both of those things. I want to reference two passages of Scripture that I think help us have an insight into compassion. And the first is Matthew 9:35 through 38. And it says this: Jesus went through all the towns and the villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send workers into the harvest field." We see here that Jesus himself had compassion on the people because he could see that they were helpless. They were hopeless. They were like sheep without a shepherd. So Jesus was able to look through the circumstances and see there is a need here, and it is a need that needs to be met. And again, the person of Christ, he met the physical needs, but then he also knew that all physical need stems from a spiritual need as well, or is at least closely related to a spiritual need as well. And so Jesus looked at these people, had compassion on them, and then was moved to meet those needs and to also meet the spiritual need that they had. Another passage of Scripture is the prodigal son, which I'm not going to read it because it's a lengthy passage, but many of you have heard it, this idea that there is a young child who goes and squanders his father's wealth. He collects his inheritance, and he goes and he moves out, and he squanders his dad's money through partying and wild living, is what Scripture says. Which, again, in the 21st century, we would look at that child and say, like, man, you did that to yourself. It says that he was living in the pig pens, trying to eat what the pigs were eating because he was so desperate for food and he was so out of options. These are the people that many middle-class Americans would look at and say, man, I can't believe that they're there. They did this to themselves. They should have made better choices. And truly, we could look at the prodigal son and say, yeah, he should have made better choices. He had everything in the father's home. But he had a spiritual need that was overflowing into him feeling like he had physical needs that he had to meet, and then he went out and tried to meet them through partying and wild living, and he ended up in the pig pen. And yet, when he returns home to the father, we see that the father doesn't condemn him and say, well, son, you did it to yourself. Your luck has run dry. I've had it with you. But instead, the father is watching for him and sees him a long way off, rushes to meet him out on the road, and he welcomes him back. And he doesn't just meet that physical need, because he does. The son is hungry. He's been eating what the pigs were eating. He's wearing rags that are in tatters because he's been living in the pig pen. And the father says, go get him a robe and put it on his shoulders. Get him the family ring and put it on his finger. Go and get the fatted calf, and we're going to slay it, and we are going to feed you. So he meets those physical needs. The son is without clothing. He's without food. The father meets those needs. But then he does the more harder thing, and the more incredible thing. He invites him back to the family table. He doesn't say, I'm going to feed you, but you have to eat outside with the servants. You have to eat outside with the dogs. He hosts a party for his child, invites him to the family table, and welcomes him back into relationship, which I believe meets far more needs than a simple meal. He invites him to the table, and he probably says, son, tell me about your travels. What have you been up to this time? I've missed you. And he talks with him and has relationship with him. What we can learn from that, again, is that meeting the physical needs, yes, it is incredibly important. But truly meeting those needs is at the cost of having relationship with those that are in need. I think I still have just a couple minutes here. So we're talking about compassion. We are talking about serving those people who are in need, the people who are hurting, the people who are disenfranchised. And we have a limited storehouse of compassion unless we are actively pursuing the Lord to be filled. And so how do we know when we are losing compassion? How do we know when we are getting ready to be burnt out? If you recognize as you are serving people that you are starting to have feelings of bitterness and hatred, unexplained bouts of anger, then your compassion may be running dry. If you've lost your desire to connect with this person, then you're probably finding yourself lacking in compassion. If you've lost your desire to pray for them, then your compassion is running low. If you find yourself sitting in judgment over them and looking at their actions, looking at what they're doing, and only having an attitude of judgment towards them, then you are running low on compassion. If you find yourself constantly dwelling on how they have fallen short or they've disappointed you and others, then you're running a little low on compassion. And if you no longer believe the best in them, you're running low on compassion. Now, I'm not saying that if all of those things are true, that you're a bad person. I'm just saying that it takes an actual miracle for us to have compassion on human beings. Because if we're left to our own devices, we are but human, and we will turn to judgment. We will turn to bitterness and anger. We expect people, I'm providing for you, so you have to fit in this box of what I expect from you because I gave you money, I gave you shelter. And it takes an actual miracle from God for us to have true compassion on people. So then that informs what we do if we start to feel those things. We turn back to God. And here's a couple just practical things you can do. Again, I believe this is in your folder. But we share strategically. We don't go and complain and gossip, but we go with people that we trust as spiritual leaders that are also praying for us, praying for these people. It can be a pastor. It can be a trusted friend. It can be someone on staff at My Village Ministries. It can be whomever. And we share to strategize, not to just dump all of our problems on them in a complaintive way, but instead we share to help get better perspective. We acknowledge the attack of the enemy. That's something that we can do. We opened up this whole training acknowledging the fact that the enemy really doesn't like My Village Ministries. The enemy really doesn't like the church and what the church is trying to do to meet needs in the community. Not saying our church, but like the whole church. The enemy doesn't like it whenever people are coming to know Christ and seeing him actively portrayed in the community. So the enemy is going to attack. And so when we see somebody that we are lacking compassion for and we find ourselves getting angry and judgmental, we recognize, God, the enemy is trying to get me to distance myself from this person. The enemy's whispering lies to me that this person doesn't deserve my love and compassion because they haven't earned it. We recognize that the enemy's attacking and we rebuke him. We preach the gospel to ourselves. We remind ourselves of what Scripture says. We remind ourselves this person is made in the image of God. This person is dearly cherished and beloved by the Father. And likewise, I should love them too. We seek to know more of their story and to understand them. We ask them questions about, hey, I couldn't help but notice that you went and you did this thing. Tell me, what made you do that? How did that go? You get to know them. You ask them questions. You don't just say, how could you? I can't believe you. But we say, hey, tell me more about how you got where you are. I want to know. I want to know about you. Tell me about your family. Tell me about your life. We celebrate them. It is really easy when we're struggling to have compassion for somebody to only look at what they do wrong, but we choose to look at the things that they're doing right. And we say, hey, I know that you've been homeless for a while, and I heard that you went out and you put in some applications for apartments yesterday. That is awesome. Great job. I know that you've been jobless for a while, and you told me today that you applied for a couple jobs. That's amazing. How can I help you? Great job. And then through those celebrations, we encourage them. We remind them that growth, healing, it's not linear. Hardly ever does somebody just get better and better and better and better. But as we are growing, whether it's spiritually, whether it's emotionally, whether it's financially, growth looks like this. We get better, we drop. We get better, we drop. We encourage them and tell them, hey, it's okay that you slip up every once in a while. I'm here for you, and you are making progress. Wonderful job. I'm praying for you. Let me know what I can do. Those are some things that you can do if you are struggling to have compassion for people. And the most important thing that we can do constantly is to be praying, to be seeking the Lord. And so there is a prayer of release that we put. That's just something that we found that is helpful. That's in your folder. And it's a prayer that if you don't have the words through your frustration, if you're like, God, I don't even know what to say right now, you can turn to the Lord and have that prayer that's written out that you can use to give yourself words of what to say. So we are getting ready to transition a little bit into more of the intricate purpose of My Village Ministries, talking a little bit about what it is that we do, talking about not just the purpose, but what it looks like actively as we are serving this community. So before we do that, we're going to watch a video, and then Kenzie's going to come talk about the purpose of My Village Ministries.
I was working and trying to finish my GED, but I had to drop out because I was so overwhelmed with the kids being home for school and not being able to get any help. Single mom of 3 who finished her GED while her kids were hosted by MVM. She was fighting the EMTs off of her and crying because she didn't want to go to the hospital and let her kids enter foster care. Host mom through MVM, who hosted 2 girls while their mama got the medical care she needed and was reunited with her kids 2 days later. My doctor wanted me to go to the hospital yesterday for chest pain, but I had no one to leave my babies with. Single mom of 2 whose kids were hosted for 1 night while she got the help she needed. I work nights and their mom left, and I can't stay awake to care for them during the day. I need childcare and support, and I don't want to lose my job. Single dad of 3. I have had full custody of both my grandchildren since my daughter passed away. I'm overwhelmed and tired and need support. Grandmother of 2 who has a host family to support her through MVM. My landlord won't fix the broken things in our apartment. I'm going to sleep in the park, but I don't want my baby to have to do that. Single mom of a sweet boy who is hosted through MVM. My baby is due in 3 weeks, and I have nowhere for my kids to be while I'm at the hospital giving birth. I don't want them to be scared. Single mom of 3, now 4, who is facing giving birth alone after she immigrated from Haiti. I have to say how grateful and blessed I am to have the girls' host family still in their lives. I can call them when I have questions, the girls can talk to them whenever, and they still watch the girls on weekends. If it wasn't for them opening their home and going through what they had to get the girls, I may not have the girls right now. Mom's staying at a homeless shelter while she worked to get housing. When I grow up, I want to be just like you. I want to love Jesus and help people who need a family. 8-year-old girl sharing her future dreams with her host mom. She has started to take down her walls and trust me as her mentor. I love being able to be someone she looks up to and get to intentionally listen to her and share God with her. One of our mentors sharing about a beautiful relationship being built. My favorite part of the LEC is the devotional. It's so cool that God has a plan for my life. 12-year-old boy who participated in our Learning Extension Center with his MVM mentor.
Explaining what MVM does. If you guys watched the video and saw all the different situations, they're all various, they're all different. There were some one-night hostings and there were some that were continuous in relationship, and that is so cool that we get to be a part of that. So today I'm going to be talking to you guys about the purpose of MVM, kind of explaining to you guys what we do and why we do it. And so just talking about what MVM does, giving you a wide view of orphan care in general. So there's 3 different types. There's going to be adoption, foster care, and then family preservation and prevention. So adoption, as we all know, that is where you bring a child into your home permanently. That is very redemptive based. You're bringing a child in who no longer has a family and you're reconciling. There's foster care, where you are temporarily, possibly permanently later on, bringing a child or children into your home. And then there's family preservation, which is proactive. So MVM focuses on the family preservation. We believe that there are opportunities, as Jake mentioned earlier, where they might just need support. They might need a community to wrap around them. They don't need the children taken out of their home. And so that is what we focus on as My Village Ministries, is family preservation and the proactive piece of orphan care. There is a need for all three of these. If it hasn't been said at all today yet, we truly believe that there is a place for adoption. There is a place for foster care. We don't want to replace that in any way. We want to come alongside of it. Social workers, if you don't know, are completely overworked. They have more cases than they need, just in Richland County alone. And so we want to walk alongside them. There are cases that they can refer to us where it's just family in need of support or neglect, where they just need some extra tools and relationship and community to wrap around them. Our 5 main objectives that MVM has, the first is going to be prevent childhood abuse and neglect. So there are 2 reasons that abuse and neglect happen in the home, and one is going to be that stress and crises occur and the family doesn't know how to deal with it. Maybe it's a single mom who just can't juggle everything. Or there's also social isolation, that family doesn't have the support that they need. Examples were given that a mom was about to give birth and she didn't have anyone to watch her other kids while she went to the hospital. In case you didn't know, if you bring your children to the hospital and there's no adult with them in the waiting room, child services is called. It's the law. And so there are easy situations that we could you could call someone. You probably can think of a list of people that you could call in that situation where you need help, and someone can come and watch your kids. And we want to provide that for people who don't have that. The second is going to be provide support and stability. So one of our objectives, like I just said, is to prevent abuse and neglect. And so to do that, we want to provide support and stability to these families to help get them back on their feet. But our goal is long-term. So give them tools that they've never been taught before. Give them support and relationships that they didn't have before. Those are the things that they need for long-term success, and that is our goal. 3 is prevent unnecessary foster care placements. Like I just said, we truly believe that there is a place for foster care, 100%, but we don't want unnecessary foster care placements. There is trauma in that. You're being taken away from your family, and we want to prevent that if at all possible. So like I said, a single mom, she goes to the hospital. There's an emergency surgery. There is a birth about to happen. She doesn't have anyone to watch her kids. That could be a foster care placement if she doesn't have anyone to watch the children and come and help her. And so that is something super easy that one of us could do. We could go and take their child for a few days while they're in the hospital and recovering. So like I said, think about how easy that would be for you guys to find someone and how easy it could then be for you to be that person for them. 4 is prevent, reduce, and repair trauma. As we've talked about earlier today, and we'll continue talking about today, having a healthy environment and family is super important for children who are developing. We're gonna focus a lot later in the trauma portion, but children who are developing, it is super important to take care during that time. So when there's trauma, there's adverse experiences, a lot can happen in risks. So a child experiencing trauma, they can have their ability to connect, attach, and relate to others impaired. So that's going to affect them long-term later on in life. They won't be able to create relationships, which could lead to social isolation. So we're seeing a pattern here. We want to help create a healthy home and relationships, a healthy environment for both the children and the family, the parents as well, so that way we can help for long-term success. We want to redirect children and their families to a successful environment, a safe environment for them. And then 5, we want to provide holistic care. So we're not here just to care for their materialistic needs, their physical well-being. We are here to care about not only their physical well-being, but their mental well-being, their emotional well-being, and their spiritual well-being too. We want to care wholly for the entire person and the entire family. So you're hearing us talk a lot about the children, but also we 100% care about the families too, the parents who are coming to us saying, I need help. We care about them too. And you'll hear later on about different roles that we have where you'll be working with the referring parent and you're working with the children. So there's a lot of opportunities there, but we care wholly for the family. And as Maddie is going to mention later, we work solely through the church. So we work with churches who are MVM churches. They have people in the church there who are committed to this ministry and who we believe that the church needs to be during this time. First and foremost, we want to resurrect biblical hospitality. So Matthew 25, we are called to give food and water. We are called to give clothes, care for those who are sick. We are called to care for the stranger and invite them into our home. So we believe in that. We believe that we as a church should be providing and caring for those who are in our community and outside of our community too. So that is our first and biggest belief for the church. Second, we believe that we should be repurposing our homes and families. We know that our home is our safest place, it's where we can retreat to, but there are people who don't have that space to retreat to, and we believe that we are called to repurpose our homes for those who need it for that temporary time. 3, we need to rethink ownership. So many times as we talked in the poverty session, there's a mindset of, well, you put yourself there. You made that choice and that's where you are now. We believe that as the church, we should be walking alongside everybody in our community and outside of our community. Instead of keeping ourselves at a distance, saying, maybe I'll give you some money or maybe I'll keep you at arm's length. We believe that we should be walking hand in hand, side by side with these people and letting them know that we are taking ownership as the church to walk alongside is our responsibility to help get you back on your feet. 4, we need to remarket the need. So it is an honor and a blessing. We heard this actually at one of our churches that we were presenting at for MVM. It is a blessing to do this work, guys. The people who we are working with may feel blessed, but we also are blessed to be able to do this work and work with these people and create this community. So we want the church to remarket the need and see the vision, grow a care community. We should be doing this as the church anyway, is walking alongside people within our congregation saying, hey, I heard you need help. Let me do this for you. But we also can do this through My Village Ministries to those that we are hosting and those that we are hurting. And then 5, we want to redefine success. So again, it's Jake talked about this a little bit, but we want to celebrate the small things. You know, this could seem like a very long, very hard path that these parents are taking when they call us to find a job, to find a home, whatever their need may be. We want to celebrate the small things. Hey, you're homeless right now and you're in a shelter, but that is awesome that you applied for apartments. That is awesome that you're looking for a job and you made your resume. That looks great. And asking how can you help and celebrating with them, walking with them amidst their journey. So we want to make sure that they see that we are for them, we believe in them, and that we love them during this time. So we're going to take probably like a 5 to 10 minute break and let you guys fill up on coffee, go to the bathroom, and then we can kind of come back in about 5-10 minutes.
We'll take like 2 more minutes and then we'll get started. All righty, I think we are gonna go ahead and get started. Dive back in here. This is gonna be some of the fun stuff. Hopefully what will answer a lot of your questions. I know, when we kind of talk about this idea of preventative foster care and what does it mean to host a child and what does that look like? This section right here, we're gonna talk anatomy of a hosting. So if you've got this handout in there, you can grab this out of your packet. This will kind of explain the process of how this whole thing works. So you guys are probably gonna have questions. That's great, and I will go over those at the end of this section here. But if you wanna pull out your handout, I will kind of walk you guys through what this looks like. So you guys should be two-sided. You should have anatomy of the hosting on one side, and on the other side, you should have anatomy of a hosting community coach. So this is another one of our roles. We have our host families, who are the ones who host the kiddos. in their home. But then another one of our MVM roles is called the community coach. And what the community coach kind of does, we'll talk about this more in a little bit, but they're kind of the caseworker, for lack of better terms, who kind of walks with the referring parents and helps them, get back on their feet, helps them get out of the crisis they're in. But they also kind of help bridge that gap between the host family who's hosting the kiddos and the referring parent. Hopefully this will all make sense to you in just a minute, but I just wanted to note that there is a different one. We actually added this on because we didn't have this before, but the process for a community coach looks a little bit different than the process for a host family. So we have that as well. But we're going to start with just the regular anatomy of a hosting. So if you want to look at that one, at the very top it says crisis occurs. Now this crisis could be, a lot of what we see is homelessness, right? Parents don't have secure housing for them or for their kiddos. It could be a medical need. So mom's in the hospital having a baby, has no one to watch her kids. The emergency room has to call CPS for those kiddos, okay? Which is super sad, right? Because she has to give birth and have this baby. She has to be in the hospital, or maybe it's for surgery or something. But the kids cannot be in the hospital by themselves, which, side note, if you don't know, Jake and I were just in the hospital for a week with our daughter, and it just gave me such new and fresh perspective for this ministry, because our church and our friends really stepped up. Some of you guys are here and took on the burden of caring for our 2 boys who are still here at home, and our cats and all the good things, right? And I just thought, wow, what if we didn't have that community, right? What if we didn't have the family and the friends that gladly said, I will take care of these kiddos? We would have been in a real bind. And so there are tons of families. I know we already talked about poverty and compassion, but these families who are in poverty, it's not just material poverty, right? But it's poverty of resources, poverty of community. And so that's kind of where MVM likes to step in and say, hey, you're in crisis. We all face crisis, but you're in crisis and you don't have support. Let us help you. So a crisis occurs. Could be a medical crisis, could be homelessness. Sometimes it is parents who want to go to a drug rehab program because they're trying to better themselves for their family, right? But they have nowhere for their kids to go. Those are just some of the examples that happen. So a crisis occurs. Now, our goal as MVM is we want to go to all of our social service agencies and partners around here and say, hey, we are My Village Ministries, and this is what we do. We can help you. We can help the people that you help. And we kind of give them our number. We give them our information so that when they interface with these people who are in crisis, they can say, hey, here's a resource for you. Call My Village Ministries. They can help you with your kids during this time. So that happens. Someone's in crisis. Let's just use the example of homelessness. That's an easy one, right? Okay, they're homeless. They go to the homeless shelter. They're like, I don't know what to do with my kids. The homeless shelter says, hey, call My Village Ministries. So that parent will get on the phone and call My Village Ministries. They call our referral line, and we have someone who will answer that. And we answer it, we kind of say, hey, this is who we are, who are you? We let them kind of just vent, explain what's going on, hear them. They say, hey, I'm homeless, I don't have anywhere for my kids to go. I can stay in the shelter, but I need somewhere for my kids. And so if it's a good fit, which in that case, it would be a great fit for My Village Ministries, if it's a good fit, then we say, okay, great, let's move forward with this then. So our referral line volunteer or our staff member, whoever answered the phone, would then start to reach out to our ministry leads, our host families, and say, hey, is anyone available to host for 2 girls ages 7 and 8? And so we start looking as a staff for an appropriate hosting for these kiddos. So the call comes in, it's approved by MVM, our staff says, yes, this is a good hosting, let's move forward. Then we work on finding a host family. And so we do that, and you guys will find out if you want to become a host family. When you go through that process, we really work closely with you in figuring out what's a good fit for you. Maybe only really short-term hostings are a good fit for you. Maybe you want the longer-term hostings. Maybe you can only do 1 kid or 2 kids or teenagers or babies or whatever. We'll work with you to figure out what is the best fit for your family. So we work on finding a host family. Once that is established, we'll call back the referring parent and say, okay, we've got a host family for you. Let's set up an intake. And at that intake appointment, a staff member will go and the host family will go, and we will kind of set up a meeting where these families can meet. And we have some paperwork that the parents have to do and all that kind of good stuff. And then the kids will transition from the referring parent to the host family. And then they will go home with the host family. During that intake, we also set up kind of like the goals for the hosting, right? So we like to try to set up, so in this case, it would be to establish stable housing. That would be their goal, right? So we would set that up and we'd say, you know what, we think it's gonna take you about 2 months probably to get in where you need to get in. And so we kind of set out that plan from the beginning so our host families kind of know, like, this is what the plan looks like, and then our referring parents also know this is kind of what the plan looks like moving forward. So we kind of set that up. That all happens at the intake. Once kiddos go home to the host family, within 24 to 48 hours, there is a home visit that will happen with your community coach. So you will also get assigned a community coach for that case, for that hosting, okay? That community coach is gonna go to the host family's home within 24 to 48 hours and just check in, say, hey, how are you guys doing? Do you have everything you need? Can we get you meals? Can we get you supplies? Do you need help working with the kiddos? Or maybe there's some behaviors that we need to help you with. So they'll make sure everything is good there. And then moving forward throughout the hosting, you'll see the next bubble says there's weekly visits with the host family and the referring parent. So one of our goals is we don't want the kids to lose connection and relationship with their parents during a hosting, right? So we aim for a weekly visit between the kiddos and their parents. Sometimes, depending on where the parents are at or what's going on, sometimes it's in person and the community coach can kind of help facilitate that. Sometimes it's a FaceTime, right? Or a call or whatever. But we like to have that weekly connection. And this whole time, throughout this whole process, we really encourage, one of the things we love at MVM and that really makes MVM different is our emphasis on relationship building. I wasn't here earlier, so I don't know how much of this was talked about, but I know Kenzie's gonna talk about relationship building here in a minute. But we wanna build a relationship between the host family and the referring parent, right? We want to build this relationship and say, we are for you, we are not against you, we want to work with you, we want to support you, we want you to have your kids back, we want you to be stable and not in crisis. And so that's kind of one of the different things about MVM versus, foster care, things like that, that we really emphasize that relationship and we want them to know they're loved. And also, we know that we have kind of an ulterior motive, right? We love Jesus and we want them to know Jesus. We want to love them with the love of Jesus. And so we work on building that relationship. So as much as is safe and possible, we encourage that communication between the host family and the referring parent. And your community coach, the staff at MVM will help you guys figure that out, because you might be like, I don't know if this feels safe or if this feels good. And so we will help you guys kind of establish those boundaries and figure that out. But oftentimes what we've seen is great relationships being built. So weekly visits will kind of happen moving forward. Your community coach is going to meet with the referring parent. They're going to meet with them every week to kind of keep working on this plan, right? Finding housing, applying for jobs, whatever it might be. And they're also going to help facilitate a visit with the kiddos and their parents each week. So those are kind of what happens during a hosting. If everything is going well, if our plan is moving forward, parents have gotten stabilized, then we will reunify. So we make a plan for the kiddos to go back home and any kind of follow-up care that they might need. So reunification happens, which I don't know, Kenzie, if you remember the stat right off the top of your head, but like over 99% of our families reunify, which if you know anything about foster care, that is a crazy high statistic. In foster care, only about 60% reunify here in Richland County. And then I can't remember, but it's like a crazy high percentage of those. 40% then re-enter the foster care system. Which is wild. It can be kind of hard. And so 99% reunification rate is huge. We love that. We're super thankful for that. So reunification will happen, and then we debrief as a team. The MVM staff, our host families, our community coach will all meet together and say, hey, how's everyone doing? How did that go? How can we continue this relationship moving forward with this family? Is there anything they need? And things like that. And then the next bubble says relationship continues. So here's our goal. Our goal is not to just help out for a short time. That is our short-term goal, but our longer-term goal is that we create a community and a support for these families who didn't have it. So that when we get back to that top bubble where if another crisis were to occur, they already have a relationship with people who are going to support them, right? They know who to call to say, hey, I need some help. They will hopefully also have a church family that they have established during that hosting that they can call on to help them. So we want to build community that will help last them for, years and years and years to come. So that's kind of what that cycle looks like of how a hosting works, how we get referrals, and how we work through that process. And then the community coach, you can look at that one. That one is super similar. It just shows the role that the community coach will play rather than the host family. So they'll sometimes answer the referral line. They will attend that intake appointment to get all the paperwork. They're going to be doing that 24 to 48-hour home visit. They're going to be kind of helping with all of those weekly visits that happen during a hosting. And then they will be really integral in completing that plan and helping reunification and all of that move forward. So that is kind of what that looks like. I just threw a lot at you. So what questions do you guys have about this process? Yes, super encouraged. So as much as is healthy for you and the kids and parents to be having that, you can text with them. A lot of our host families will be constantly texting with parents and saying, which we're actually going to talk about this more in relationship building, but just giving them that ownership of hey, you're still their parent. We still believe that you're their parent and we want to empower you in that. So asking them about, hey, how would you handle this situation? Or so-and-so is feeling really sad today. Is it okay if we give you a call and just chat? Things like that. So super encouraged, yeah. Yes, the school question. That's a really good one. So a few different things. When kids come in who are in school, our first goal would be to have them hosted by someone that is close enough to get them to school, right? That's in their school district. That's the ideal thing. Now, sometimes that doesn't happen, and there are programs and things we can work with to have the bus come pick up the kids from your house, even if you're outside of their district. So that is some stuff we would, as staff, we would kind of help you guys work that out ahead of time if it were a case where, you're 20 minutes away from their school and you don't have time to take them to school every day. So we can work things out like that. But yeah, kids would, does that answer that question? Yeah? Okay. What else? Yes, so we are still in the process. I don't think we'll ever be done reaching out and building our relationships with the agencies. So we currently have a relationship with Children's Services in Richland County, which is amazing. That was kind of our biggest one that was our goal, because we're not against you. We're not anti-foster care. We want to work with you, right? Because they're the ones interfacing with all these kids and these families. So we have a relationship with them, a couple different counseling centers. We have talked to the hospital's labor and delivery unit, and we're working on building that relationship as well. Lots, we have a whole list of people that we are currently trying to work with. And I think, and you guys probably understand this, but we are trying to help them understand, what does MVM do, right? Because it's not something that a lot of people have heard of. And so it's helping them understand, this is what we do, and this is how you can partner with us. But yeah. Yeah. Great question. So sometimes MVM gets calls where it's a situation that maybe it's a single mom or a grandma or a grandpa who's taking custody of kiddos, and they have a kid that just has behavioral issues or is, too much for them to handle. And sometimes that's not a great fit for us, because our host families, unless we have host families that are specifically trained on that kind of stuff, sometimes that can be too much, right? And they need different services. A hosting isn't necessarily going to help them, because that would be, how would we even create a plan for that hosting? You know what I'm saying? That could be forever. And so sometimes a different support, maybe connecting them to some better counseling or therapy services, would be the right fit for them. Another example might be in cases of severe neglect or abuse. That's not a case that we can handle. That definitely needs to go through children's services. We're not legally equipped to handle that, and we don't want to put any of you guys in that position. So those kind of cases would have to go straight to them. And sometimes someone might self-refer. They might see our flyer and give us a call, but then as we're talking to them, we are mandated reporters. So as a host family, you would be a mandated reporter. As a community coach, you would be a mandated reporter. And so if we hear something that's like, oh, we're gonna have to report that, you know what I mean? That wouldn't be a great fit. Does that kind of answer that question? Yeah, there's a few things where it's like, we don't know how to create a plan because this could be ongoing and forever. We're also not a daycare service, so sometimes if it's gonna be for a short stint or period of time, we can do hostings for, a single mom who's trying to establish daycare and hasn't yet, but she's gonna lose her job if she doesn't get to go to work. So there's certain situations where we can provide hostings for that, but we couldn't step in a situation to be somebody's free daycare, if that makes sense. So those are some examples. Good question. What else? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. In a sense, it's very similar to being a foster parent, but we have a little bit of a different perspective where we want to kind of keep that parent role as, with their first family, with their biological family. We want them to still be empowered, but you very much are acting as a parent when you are hosting a child. Like you're their legal guardian at that point. You're making those decisions for them. As far as dealing with that with the kids, like what do they call you and that kind of thing, that is even a tricky question even in foster care, right? Because they don't come in necessarily calling you mom and dad because you're not, and you don't want to force that. But at the same time, sometimes they will. They have attachment issues, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And so they might call you mom right away because any woman figure is a mom to them because they've had so many. And so we kind of let the kids lead in that regard. They're gonna know that they're staying with you, and in this house we have certain rules, and so we're gonna follow these rules. You'll still talk to mom or talk to dad or grandma or grandpa, whoever it is, but they will be aware that as the host family, you guys are kind of in charge, but we let them lead as far as, do they wanna call you Mr. or Mrs., whatever, just call you your first name. Some we've seen call like Mommy Maddie or whatever. So we kind of let the kids lead in how they want to do that. Yeah. Not really at all. As far as their personal preference, if that makes sense, they won't meet the host family and get to pick from host families. But we do try to do a really good job during intake of figuring out what are these kids' needs, right? Are there allergies? Are there behaviors? Are there preferences? Would they do well in a house with other kids, with other pets? Sometimes we'll take into account if they've been in an abusive situation before with a male figure. Maybe they need to be in just a home with a single mom, a single mom host family. Maybe that's the best fit. So we definitely take into consideration their needs and things like that, but they don't per se they're not involved in that process necessarily of picking a host family. What else? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes, so there is not a lot that we have found. There's one organization called Fostering the Family. Did I say that right? Fostering Families? Fostering Families. And so they do, it sounds similar to what we do, but they're less on the preventative side, and they're more trying to equip people to be foster parents in churches, and then they try to support them. So if there's, someone's being a foster parent and they have a need, like they need a bed. I have a kiddo coming home and I need a bed. Fostering Families helps reach out to these churches and say, does anyone have a bed that we can get? So they work a lot with those material resources for foster families, for families who are already fostering. And we're a little bit more on the preventative side of let's try to keep kids out of care who don't need to be in care, if that makes sense. Yeah. What else? Any other questions? Yeah. Yes, I will answer that super briefly because we will get into that more towards the end when we talk about next steps. We're going to talk about each role and kind of what that looks like, who might be the best fit for what role. They are all volunteer, except there's 4 of us on staff, so we are kind of leading the charge and training the volunteers and overseeing all of that process. As far as credentials, so I have an MSW, so I oversee kind of all of that stuff happening through our volunteers and through our other staff members. Like I have to sign off on home assessments and things like that. But mostly it is trained volunteers who are doing that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The support community, you said? So yeah, we were planted by MVM Columbus about almost a year ago now, and their like launch plan is kind of like a 3-year plan to being able to take off and be fully operational. We're kind of accelerated. We've moved past that a little bit. So in the first year, we've already had a hosting. We have 3 host families that are all good to go, finish with their process. We have 2 MVM churches that are working on becoming a fully operational MVM church. And we have 3 agencies who are like, yes, we want to partner, and more who are kind of in the work. So that's kind of to give you an idea of where this chapter is at. That's where we're at. We have several people who are already on what we call our care community, which we'll talk about that too. And they are people who said, hey, maybe I can't host, but I want to bring meals to the people who are hosting, or I want to deliver diapers, or I can offer babysitting or tutoring or whatever it might be, because we know that this is a big job. Being a host family is a big job, bringing kids into your life, into your home. And so we want our churches, they're our support, right? We want the churches to wrap around you and say, we got you covered, we're gonna give you food, we're gonna get you clothes, we're gonna get you anything you need. So during our first hosting that we had back in May, we had incredible support. It was Jake and I hosted, it was us that did the first hosting, and we had meals like every single day. It was wild. And people like, what do you need? How can we help? And so it was just so reassuring to us to know that our community is, and it's only gonna grow, but people are ready to jump in and be that support. Yeah. Any other questions on this? And of course, if you think of any other questions about it while we're going through, shout them out. We are happy to answer. All right. Kenzie is going to come talk and show you some videos that might make you cry about relationship building with parents.
Okay, so we're going to watch 2 videos. They are videos that MVM Columbus, the main branch, actually created based off of actual hostings that happened. So it's videos between the referring parent and the host family, and they just kind of talk about their experience with MVM, but also their relationship. So while we're watching these 2 videos, just be thinking about things that stood out to you, the relationship building in those videos, and we'll talk a little bit more after.
Very panicky. I was like, oh my gosh, they're gonna take my children. They're gonna think I'm a bad mom. So many things went through my head. But then when I met Tabitha, she's like, you're so beautiful, your kids are beautiful, I love your family. It was the total opposite. Very supportive, very encouraging, because I didn't have that. So to have someone to just love me like she's known me for years and just accept me and just my children and my situation, which was extremely rough, I was just beyond thankful, but alarmed, like, who's this woman? Why does she love me so much? And then you just feel the Lord all over her. And so it's just the Lord loving me through her, which I'm beyond thankful for. Thank you.
Yeah, I was really nervous. I think I was like, okay, I'm supposed to have it all together as a mom. I should look like I know what I'm doing so that she trusts me with their kids. I still remember walking into the library and being like, can can I just hug you because I'm really scared? I'm nervous. And she was like, yes, that makes me feel better. And I was like, oh, good. So yeah, I think just nervous and wondering like, can we do this? Can we figure this out? I don't know, just nervous.
They love her children. They love Tabitha. And they see Tabitha and me. If they haven't seen me for a long time and then we both come together, they're gonna run to Tabitha. Like, Tabitha! Like, oh, what about me?
I still remember the first time you guys came to church with us and Jacob went like sprinting across the yard to me and hugged me and I was like, oh. And you were like, seriously, you had to hug me like that in weeks. And I was like, that makes me feel so great. No offense.
Love her. And her children.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what do your kids Tabitha think of?
Oh, they love, I mean, Joelle and Ella are like their big sisters, or brother and sister, that they like talk about all the time. They pray for them every night and beg for them to come over. I told them they were coming next week and they were like, when I told them today that they were coming, they were like, wait, will their kids even be there? And I was like, probably not, but you know, yeah, they adore her kids. We got to meet Joshua in the hospital.
Yeah.
Still remember that? My girls were all convinced he was like the prettiest baby in the world. And they were like, our babies won't ever look like that. I was like, no, they won't ever look like that.
Oh man, for me, it's phenomenal. Again, I lack certain experience from my past, so I don't know certain things. So to have someone that I'd be like, what? You have children. How could you not know these things? She's like, oh, it's fine. This is how you do it. Oh, what do you think about this? You know? So I really appreciate her friendship. And again, I just can't express it enough, just loving me through my trauma, should I say, and my lack of experience. So this friendship to me is everything. It's very phenomenal.
Yeah, I agree. I'm thankful too. I feel like Denise has taught me how to fight for my kids, how to stand up for things. Denise is stronger than I feel like I will ever be. There's so many times where she's like telling me stuff she's doing and I'm like, Daniel does all of that for me, so let me find out. Yeah, I mean, she's taught me so much about strength, about fighting, about perseverance, about resilience. She's a great mom to her kids. Her kids are awesome. We love her and we love her kids. Yeah.
I'm gonna cry.
Don't cry, that will really mess this up.
Most importantly, keep the Most High involved in all that you do. I've learned that from Tabitha. She involved God in everything that she does, at least involving me that I've experienced. And just be open and not judgmental because, you know, sometimes our past is not our choice. It's just the cards we were dealt. So just to bring love and understanding and lack of judgment when dealing with a family, I think that it can blossom into something very beautiful.
And that also just to acknowledge the way that they're fighting for their kids. I think that's like the biggest thing that always stood out to me with Denise was the steps that you are taking right now is such a powerful battle for your children. Just to acknowledge that and acknowledge all the strengths that you see in these women. Because the truth is they are walking battles that are probably far harder than what we've experienced or walked through. And just to enter that in with them and be ready to battle alongside of them and whatever that looks like. And also know that you're gonna learn a lot from them. I feel like I look back at our relationship and I'm like, it was probably better for me than for Denise. I feel like we walked away with great friends and these kids that we love. I'm like, we benefited. I'm like, are you okay? Did you benefit too? Hopefully you guys are good.
Absolutely.
Because I feel like we walked away the lucky ones, to have met Denise and her family and to be a part of their lives and get to experience life with them and learn from them. And I mean, Denise teaches us stuff all the time. So.
Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid, do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Earlier this year, Gertrude moved her family from Haiti to Ohio so that she could find a better life for her and her kids. A few months after she arrived, she was about to have a new baby and no longer had the support she thought she would have in Ohio. Willing to do whatever it takes to care for her family, she reached out to My Village for support.
So it was really hard, like you moving somewhere and you have no families, no friends. Sometimes I feel like I was alone, didn't have anybody to talk to, didn't have anyone to when something is bothering you or something. But I always think that moving to Ohio, it was like for a reason. So God knows. I thought I was gonna be alone, but God had his own plan. And he turned everything around. When I thought I didn't have anybody, then I have you guys. I have My Village. I feel so blessed because I didn't know what I was gonna do while I was going to the hospital to give birth to Terry. But when the social worker referred me to My Village, I said, okay, I don't know them. I was so scared. But I thank God every single day for you guys. I thank God for My Village, especially for my friend Ali. She been so helpful. She's a blessing. I didn't expect our lives to be like that because I always wanted the best for them. And that's the reason I keep fighting every day. Sometimes I feel like give up, but I have to fight for them because if I don't do it, who else?
A few weeks after the baby was born, he had to be rushed to the hospital. Allie picked up the older kids and Gertrude headed to the hospital, only to discover that God was watching out for her in a special way. While her 3 kids were with Allie, the doctor assigned to care for her baby was Allie's husband, Josh.
They told me, well, the doctor will be here soon. I said, okay. Then here Josh was. I was like, oh no. I said, oh no, but I was so happy because, he loves him. And I know at that time, I know he was gonna, give him the best care that he needs. And everybody, to be honest, everybody was so kind. They take really good care of him and stuff like that. And every time they come and say, I heard you, Dr. Watson's friends. I said, yes.
He was talking with his boss while Terry was in the hospital, and he was saying, so I have this patient I want to run by you. And I forget, the doctor asked the question. He said, well, I know this family. He said, oh, how do you know them? He said, well, her other kids are living at my house. And his boss said, all right, I think I'm gonna need you to explain more.
Gertrude has continued to face hard trials, some heartbreaking, but God has united these 2 families in a special way, and now she stands firm with a village around her.
I don't know at what point we became good friends. I think when you're driving someone to the hospital in labor, there's a special relationship that forms. And then, you have this mom who is amazing. And I think I was just blown away by the fact that, here's this mom with now 4 kids. She just had a baby. She's doing all the things that I feel like I had an army of people helping me do these things. And I didn't have 4 kids. Even with just like 1 kid, I needed an army to help me. And it was just kind of blowing my mind when I'd show up and you were taking care of a baby, recovering from labor, taking care of 3 kids, cleaning a house, cooking food. So it was it was easy to become friends with Gerda because she's incredible. She's amazing.
It's, like I said before, she just a blessing. Like, I haven't had, I have friends before, but not like that. Because usually friends I have, like, when I need them, they're not there for me. But with Ali, she always there. Sometimes I'll be like, don't you know how to say no?
I say no sometimes to little things. Just the other day, Calvin came home at the end of our hosting and he walks in the door. I said, Calvin, what's wrong? Did you have a good day at school? He's like, I just know Aiden's not gonna be here.
Oh.
So they're just like brothers and sisters. Like for real.
They are. They care about each other
so much.
They call each other like sisters, brothers. Now, okay, that's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Like they are so close, and sometimes I'll be jealous because I don't have any siblings like that. I was not so close. I growing up, I was the youngest child, and my big sister, we never close like that. And sometimes I'll talk to them, I tell them, I like how you guys, connected each other. I like how you guys being so close. Yeah. For you guys to be able, like, at that time to help, I'm so grateful for you guys. I don't know how to thank you guys enough. Like, I don't think even if I start from today till Jesus came, I will never, you'll never be enough. You'll never be enough.
Two people are better off than one, for they can help each other succeed. If one person falls, the other can reach out and help. But someone who falls alone is in real trouble. Likewise, two people lying close together can keep each other warm. But how can one be warm alone? A person standing alone can be attacked and defeated, but two can stand back to back and conquer.
What stood out? For me, when I first saw the two videos, it was just really cool to see how God has worked in those situations. For Tabitha, she was specifically talking about how she came into the church community and was going to church with them and had connected that way, and was talking about how Tabitha had 100% shown God in everything that she was doing during the hosting and afterwards in their relationship. So that was super cool. I love hearing that part every time. Anything else stand out to you guys about the video, the relationship between the referring parent and the host family? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. It's not just about caring for the kids, which is very important to my village, but it's also caring for the parent, because that's what is going to unify the family back together. It's what's going to get them back on their feet. And just caring for the whole family entirely is really cool. And I mean, I don't know if this has been said already today. It might be said later on, but the parents never lose custody of their kids during this entire hosting. The parents keep custody of their kids, which is a huge part in giving them power through this entire thing. They're making the decision to come to my village and say, I need help. But also through the whole thing, we actually heard Tabitha speak at a panel back when we were first starting the chapter, and she talked a lot about how she would call the referring parent and say, this is happening. Have you seen this before? How did you deal with it? What do you do in this situation? How can you help me? And giving them, like, bringing it to a level playing field of saying, I need help too. I'm not replacing you. I need your help. You are beneficial. You are fighting for your kids, and you have, like, power in this situation. And even just FaceTiming, sending pictures, writing cards, different things. Like, there's 100% our goal to keep the whole family connected during the entire time. So 100%. We love the aspect of keeping both the relationship of the children and the host family and the referring parent, just one unified group working together as a community for them. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like the first, like, handful of times, that first video, I cried every time. Couldn't handle it. It was just too like, not heart-wrenching, but, you know, it's just, like, very powerful and really cool to see how that all works together. Because we, like you said, Sandy, we can talk about this all day long, but when you hear the testimony of the referring parents and the host families coming together, and the fact that in both videos they were calling each other friends, like good friends, and it's like, it's not just you're taking in my children, like that last part of the anatomy of hosting, the relationship continues, like, and that has happened. And so that is 100% our goal, for sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even in that last video, like it said in the description, she had plans. There were things in line, but the plan fell apart and things changed. And so, yeah, that has to be completely terrifying. I have no idea what that feels like, but so glad that my village was on her radar and that they were able to help her and connect with her. So, yeah. And even the cool part of that is that there's relationship continuing past. And I love that so much. Yeah. Any other thoughts just that stood out to you in the videos? Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what I mean when I was saying earlier about, like, it's a blessing for us to do this work. Not only a blessing to do God's work, but we are also blessed in turn by the relationships that we have seen through this ministry and will continue to see. So, absolutely. Okay, so who do we need to be in the first interaction with the parents? So you're a community coach, you're a host family, you're an intake coordinator, you're going into this first meeting with the referring parent. Who do we need to be in that interaction? Yeah, absolutely. I always love, again, in Tabitha's video where she comes into the library and she's like, I'm nervous, can I hug you? And it's like, and then the referring parent was like, I thought, like, I'm nervous. Like, I love that, thank you. Just like, again, reaffirming that it's a level playing field. We're in this together. We are working together as a team to do this and to get you back on your feet. It's just so important to help them feel better about this. Absolutely. Who else do we need to be during that first interaction? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Anything else? Mhm. Yeah, that is 100% our goal. And that's why when we create what we're calling an MVM church, that is basically us. We need one host family to be at a church that is considered an MVM church. But then also our goal is to have that whole church during a hosting wrap around them in what we're calling care community. So 100%, anytime we have a hosting, we're going to send out an email and say, hey, so-and-so is hosting. Here's a meal train that we want to set up for them. But our goal is that your individual church wraps around you the most and is consistently checking in with you. There's another role that Maddie will talk about called a ministry lead, and they're going to kind of be overseeing their MVM church and checking in with you saying, what do you need? How are you doing? How is everything going? You're also going to have the community coach checking in during the hosting for you guys and for the children, whoever's in your home. But 100%, that is our goal for the church because, like I said, we believe that is it's our responsibility. It's a blessing to do that. So yes, we would love for them to be able to do that. But we also will. All of our whole MVM community will too. Yeah. 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 Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't think about the people who don't have those people who can bring you meals. They have no one. So they come home and they're back to cooking and they're back to cleaning and back to living normal life. They don't have that transition back home. So absolutely. So how do you guys think that we can connect during a hosting? So the children are brought into the home. It's the first day, first few days, first week. How can we connect with the children and the parents, connect them all together during the hosting? So connect the referring parent and the host parent, but also keeping them connected to their kids too. So. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm. Wow. Yeah. That's really cool. Yeah, so Maddie mentioned this a little bit during questions for the anatomy of hosting, but we definitely encourage any type of relationship that the host family is comfortable with. Some people might not want to bring the referring parent into their homes. We totally understand that at first. So it definitely is up to the discretion of the host family, kind of what they feel they're most comfortable with. But even just the simple fact of some things that were mentioned in the videos is FaceTiming, calls, pictures. And I think some of the things were mentioned on the panel we heard, but just sending them family pictures of maybe it's their first day going to school, taking a picture and sending it to the family. Just any simple way to keep them connected to their kids, and then phone calls and the weekly visits that will be happening during the hosting, but definitely lots of different ways to keep the kids involved and connected to their parents. How do we think that we could connect the referring parent and the host families during the hosting? We kind of already talked about this a little bit, but. Mm. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Mm. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. I think also, again, like I said, we kind of had like talked about this before based off of thoughts from the videos, but just calling and talking with the parent, like leveling with them, like, hey, I'm seeing this behavior. What do you typically do? Like, I'd really like to ask for your help in this situation. And just, again, really affirming that I am not replacing you. I am not, I'm not their mom. You are their mom, and you know them best. And I really want to hear from you what your thoughts are. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Any other thoughts or questions on relationship building with parents? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, well, I just want to wrap it up and just kind of say that our whole message and hope for relationship during hostings and even afterwards is just letting them know that we are for them and that we believe in them, and we want them to know that we see their strength in making this decision for their family, and that is so, so important to vocalize. Yeah. Good question. So technically it's like listed as like a 3-month process, but I think depending on how quick your paperwork goes and stuff, it definitely, how quick, yeah. 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 Yeah, it's all up to you, and yeah, so it definitely, there's like a list of steps which Maddie will go over, but 100% it's kind of up to your speed and as quick as you can get like appointments and stuff. So yeah. Any other questions? Okay, cool. Well, Maddie's gonna come up and talk about training.
So I'm gonna apologize to you guys now because you pretty much are gonna get to just listen to me the rest of the time. So we are gonna talk about trauma, and after trauma, then we are gonna talk about just kind of the next steps and like how do you move forward from here? What are the roles in MVM? What might the Lord be kind of prompting you to say yes to, and further questions and things like that. But trauma is like a super important piece for us because all of our kids are coming from a place of trauma, right? Even being removed from your home, that's trauma. So even if their life looks pretty quiet before that, this is a traumatic event. But a lot of times our kiddos are coming with, years and years of trauma that's kind of stacked up. And so the way that we believe that we parent kids from hard places, you'll hear us say that, either kids from hard places or kids from trauma, is a little bit different than we would approach regular parenting. And so we want to kind of make sure we're informed about trauma, how it affects our brains, how it affects our kiddos' brains, kind of what that might look like in behaviors, and then how we approach that in a loving way and to get the best response, really, from the kids. So here we go. Let's dive into trauma. You guys should have a sheet that says understanding trauma, so we're going to start there. And you'll see the definition up there says trauma is any type of distressing event or experience that can have an impact on a person's ability to cope and function. Trauma can result in emotional, physical, and psychological harm. So trauma, it's important to understand that trauma isn't necessarily stress, right? All of us experience stress, but trauma is when we have a large stressor that happens for a prolonged period of time. And then what it does is it starts to actually change our brain. It starts to change the way that we function and interact with the world. And so for a lot of our kids, it's these ongoing things, but it could also be a one-time event. Sometimes it's a one-time event that is super traumatic. It's out of the ordinary. Your rights have been violated in some way. You've seen something that's extremely graphic. Sometimes our kids are witness to violent events, and that is trauma. Sometimes it has happened to them, and that is the trauma, right? So it can look like a bunch of different things, but we just wanted to start by giving you guys kind of that like working definition of trauma. We are going to watch, do you have that video, Jake? Okay, so we are gonna watch a video really quick on how chronic stress affects your brain. This is just kind of a general, like, good starter video of how is this gonna be affecting us, but then also our kiddos. So let's watch this.
Are you sleeping restlessly, feeling irritable or moody, forgetting little things, and feeling overwhelmed and isolated? Don't worry, we've all been there. You're probably just stressed out. Stress isn't always a bad thing. It can be handy for a burst of extra energy and focus, like when you're playing a competitive sport or have to speak in public. But when it's continuous, the kind most of us face day in and day out, it actually begins to change your brain. Chronic stress, like being overworked or having arguments at home, can affect brain size, its structure, and how it functions, right down to the level of your genes. Stress begins with something called the hypothalamus-pituitary-adrenal axis, a series of interactions between endocrine glands in the brain and on the kidney, which controls your body's reaction to stress. When your brain detects a stressful situation, your HPA axis is instantly activated and releases a hormone called cortisol, which primes your body for instant action. But high levels of cortisol over long periods of time wreak havoc on your brain. For example, chronic stress increases the activity level and number of neural connections in the amygdala, your brain's fear center. And as levels of cortisol rise, electric signals in your hippocampus, the part of the brain associated with learning, memories, and stress control, deteriorate. The hippocampus also inhibits the activity of the HPA axis, so when it weakens, so does your ability to control your stress. That's not all, though. Cortisol can literally cause your brain to shrink in size. Too much of it results in the loss of synaptic connections between neurons and the shrinking of your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that regulates behaviors like concentration, decision-making, judgment, and social interaction. It also leads to fewer new brain cells being made in the hippocampus. This means chronic stress might make it harder for you to learn and remember things, and also set the stage for more serious mental problems like depression and eventually Alzheimer's disease. The effects of stress may filter right down to your brain's DNA. An experiment showed that the amount of nurturing a mother rat provides its newborn baby plays a part in determining how that baby responds to stress later in life. The pups of nurturing moms turned out less sensitive to stress because their brains developed more cortisol receptors, which stick to cortisol and dampen the stress response. The pups of negligent moms had the opposite outcome, and so became more sensitive to stress throughout life. These are considered epigenetic changes, meaning that they affect which genes are expressed without directly changing the genetic code. And these changes can be reversed if the moms are swapped. But there's a surprising result. The epigenetic changes caused by one single mother rat were passed down to many generations of rats after her. In other words, the results of these actions were inheritable. It's not all bad news, though. There are many ways to reverse what cortisol does to your stressed brain. The most powerful weapons are exercise and meditation, which involves breathing deeply and being aware and focused on your surroundings. Both of these activities decrease your stress and increase the size of the hippocampus, thereby improving your memory. So don't feel defeated by the pressures of daily life. Get in control of your stress before it takes control of you.
Wow, sorry about that. That was like a lot of bass in that. Okay, what did you guys see that stood out, or that was maybe something you didn't know before from that video? Yeah, it's generational for the good and the bad, right? Either way. Yeah. What else? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's wild. Our brain, just like any other muscle of our body, right? The more we use a certain area, or the more that part is worked, the more active it's going to be, right? Just like our muscles. If I use my arms all the time, I'm going to build muscle in my arms. And so it unfortunately works on the negative side as well. When we are operating in that fear center of our brain, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's going to more often be our go-to response. What else? Anything else new that popped out? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. If you do like a deep dive into trauma and into parenting kids from trauma, you will find just more and more of that research that the mom specifically is very important, that connection, which is a lot of times, and you guys, if you become host families, might see some of this, but when kiddos from hard places come into your home, specifically a lot of their trauma behaviors will come towards the mom or the mother figure. Because of that, because they've missed that core need in their life. That's not saying that dads are not important, because they absolutely are. It's just it comes out differently than it does for the moms. But yeah, it is wild how that chronic stress, how all of us undergo stress, right? But when it's just such a good reminder for me every time I see this, that even us as well-adjusted adults, if we allow that chronic stress to continue in our lives, it's going to change our brain, and it's going to change our reaction towards things. But the good news is we can reverse that, right? We can reconnect the brain, and we can do all of those things. So on your handout, you'll see the next thing says 3 guiding principles. So when we are parenting kids from trauma, kids from hard places, we like to follow these 3 principles. The first one is we need to understand that their behavior is not a matter of won't, but can't. And so a lot of times when kids are refusing to do something, or our kids from hard places are being really ornery or lashing out, we think, you're not doing this on purpose. You're wanting to get back at me, right? But these kids from hard places, as we just saw, their brain is different. And a lot of times it's not that they won't do it, but they can't. They need help being able to make those connections in their brain to make better choices, or they need words, or they need you to mirror some things for them, which we'll get more into kind of what that actually looks like. But we need to remember it's not won't, but can't. Number 2, we need to understand that behind every behavior, there is a need. This is huge. Every time we see a behavior coming from one of these kiddos, we have to stop, which is hard. As a parent, this is hard, to stop and say, what is the need? What are they missing? What are they needing right now that they don't have the words to ask for? And so we have to kind of be detectives in that sense in figuring out, what do these kiddos need? Number 3 is we cannot take away a survival strategy from a child without teaching them a new one to replace it. So these kids have built up their own strategies to deal with their fear and what they've experienced in the world. And a lot of times this is not appropriate behavior, right? Sometimes it's yelling or hitting or destroying things or whatever it might be. Those are pretty extreme, but just so you get the point. And a lot of times as parents, we want to just correct the behavior, right? We want to say, this has to stop. This isn't okay. But we have to understand that that is how that kid before us has learned to survive their situation, whatever it might be, a real or perceived threat. And so we have to teach them a better way to approach it, right? We're not going to just take your survival strategy and say, don't do that. We're going to say, hey, this isn't the best way to do this, but let me show you. Let's do this. And so we have to really be patient with our kids and work with them on that. The next thing is 5 survival strategies. You can just kind of see, again, this is getting to the point that our kids are building survival strategies that we like to look at and say, this is defiance, right? This is you being disrespectful. And it's not to say that these are not disrespectful actions, but we have to remember it's a survival strategy. These kids either feel like they are threatened or they have actually been threatened before, okay? And so things that they might use: manipulation, control, triangulation, which is where they pit parents against each other or caregivers against one another. I'm sure if you're a parent, you've seen that happen. Aggression, which is more the feelings of anger and things like that. And then violence, where they're actually letting that anger out into action. So those are some of the things that our kids from hard places will use to try to feel like they can get by and survive. We are going to watch one more video, and then we are going to talk more specifically about how to work with kids who come from hard places and what that looks like. So we've got one more video here. It's about childhood trauma in the brain. It kind of shows a real life cartoon scenario of what it looks like when a kid is affected by trauma.
Brain development is much more than a story about biology. From the earliest years, relationships with others play a key role in shaping how our brain grows and develops. Early relationships, where there is abuse and neglect, have a long-term impact on children. A brain that has adapted to survive in a threatening or unpredictable world may not work so well in an ordinary environment. This can create what is called latent vulnerability, where early abusive or neglectful experiences with carers put children at greater risk of experiencing mental health problems in the future. For these children, compared to their peers, common experiences like moving to a new school can feel more daunting and stressful. New faces can appear threatening, while positive social cues can be missed. It can be harder to negotiate new social situations and learn to trust new people. Even fun experiences like joining a new sports team can be challenging. Too much focus on potential threat cues can mean missing out on positive social cues, such as a playful nudge. Or it causes an overreaction, which leads to an increased risk of conflict and sometimes violence. These reactions can increase the likelihood of generating new stressful events. It's harder to deal with everyday challenges when you feel unconfident and anxious inside, and harder to build and maintain relationships. Over time, this can mean a child loses friends and the support of adults, and so misses out on opportunities to grow and develop. This social thinning can increase the risk of mental health problems in the future. Neuroscience research is beginning to shed new light on how vulnerability unfolds over a child's life. All children need care and stimulation from adults who value them and who show them attention and love. These experiences shape a child's brain development. When children face traumatic experiences like abuse and neglect, their brain adapts to help them cope. We know of changes in 3 different brain systems: the reward, memory, and threat systems. Experiences of domestic violence or physical abuse can lead to hypervigilance, where the brain reacts more to threat. This might help a child stay safe in an early adverse environment, but it can cause problems in more ordinary environments. Hypervigilance can best be understood as a pattern of adaptation rather than a sign of damage. Abuse and neglect can also mean a world where a child's basic needs for care and attention are not met. This can shape the brain's reward system, the part of the brain that helps us learn about positive aspects of our environment and motivates our behaviour. Over time, the brain's reward system can learn to respond differently to things like positive social cues. Neuroscience studies have also pointed to changes in the autobiographical memory system, our memory of everyday past experiences. Following trauma, negative memories appear to become more salient, which means they become more prominent than positive ones. And everyday memories can also become less detailed. This is a problem because we need to draw on past experiences to help us deal with new social situations. Neuroscience research is showing how childhood trauma can create latent vulnerability, increasing the risk of later mental health problems like anxiety and depression. This vulnerability is not just located in the child, but arises through their relationships. Helping children who have experienced trauma still requires ordinary boundaries and consequences, but it also requires us to step back and reflect and see behaviour that we find challenging in a different light. A child may simply be doing their best to survive now, with brain adaptations from the past. We know a child's brain has the capacity to continue to adapt. For this to happen, they need our help to build and maintain trusted relationships, manage everyday stresses, and prevent new ones from happening. We need to encourage them to try again and believe things can be different. This is far from an easy task and takes time. Science is helping reframe our understanding of childhood trauma. Seeing children's behaviour in a new light can mean we respond differently. But there is much still to learn. Working together, we can develop more effective approaches that promote resilience and recovery. We can help children build trusting relationships and create opportunities for their brains to adapt in new ways.
Such a good video. All right, did anything stand out from that video? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. This affects not only kids, but people who are adults who didn't have maybe these needs met, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that they get bigger, right? And our good memories get smaller and fuzzier in our brains. That is wild. I think everybody here knows, we adopted our 3 kiddos from foster care, and we definitely saw and still see a lot of this playing out in them, particularly that overreaction or misinterpretation of social situations, right? Where someone's joking, where someone is trying to be your friend, and they see it as a threat instead. And so they can overreact, and that can cause, a lot of extra arguments or fights at school or issues with peers and adults because the lens that they see the world through now is different. And we're working to retrain that and heal their brain, but it is wild. We've seen all of that stuff actually play out right in front of our eyes. And so it's crazy. Yeah, any other thoughts on that video? Yeah, we can share the link of all those videos. Yeah. Yeah, there's actually 2 videos at the end here that we're not going to get to watch because we couldn't get them in the right spot. So we'll just grab all the links and we'll email those out to you guys. So if you want to rewatch it and kind of sift through it, you can do that. Yeah. Okay, so trauma in the brain, really, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this because those videos, I feel like, covered it really well, but we have to understand that people who have experienced trauma have a harder time communicating to the different parts of their brain because trauma changes the brain. We have, that video showed there's less connections, right? And so we all know we have a left brain and a right brain that operate differently. We also have an upstairs and a downstairs brain, which we'll talk about in a minute, but we lose connections from the sides and upstairs and downstairs of our brain when we go through trauma. And so it makes it harder for us to use all of the facets of our brain. So I really wish that this picture was up there for you guys because I don't think we have it printed out. But there's this thing that we call upstairs and downstairs brain, and we have a hand model. So I'm going to show you guys this. This is something you can actually do with your kids. It helps give them a voice, but it also just gives us as caregivers understanding of what is happening in their life. So when we talk about an upstairs and downstairs brain, what we're talking about is our upstairs brain is our higher thinking brain, right? This is our reasoning brain. That's not really developed all the way until we're 21 or whatever. So that is what causes, teenagers to make questionable decisions sometimes because it's not fully formed. But the upstairs is our higher thinking, reasoning brain. And our downstairs brain is our basic functions, right? This is keeping us breathing, keeping us digesting, our heart beating, all of that kind of stuff. And so I'm going to show you this hand model, okay? I need to make this a little bit bigger so that I can see this for you. Usually we'd have this on the screen so you could see it a little bit better. So in this hand model, our fingers are the upstairs brain, okay? So you're going to pretend like your fingers are your higher thinking, reasoning, all that kind of stuff. Down here on your palm, this is our downstairs brain. That's your basic function, okay? Your body is able to eat, sleep, breathe, okay? And then our thumb is what we call our amygdala, or the limbic center of our brain. This is where emotions are stored. This is also where your fear center, that fight or flight, is in your thumb, okay? I mean, for the purposes of this illustration, obviously. And so we talk about with our kiddos, our whole brain needs to be connected like this for it to operate well. The downstairs, upstairs, and the amygdala all need to be connected to each other. This is when we are calm, when our brain can think and operate the way that it's supposed to. But with kids from trauma, and even us as adults sometimes, we will flip our lids. And this happens where our brain gets disconnected from one another when our amygdala, our fear center, has been overworked. And so it gets really big, and it pushes the upstairs part of our brain away from the downstairs part of our brain. So things are happening in our body, we're having emotions, but our upstairs brain, our reasoning is not connected. So we can't understand why we're having the feelings that we're having, right? We can't understand why we're having the response that we're having because our upstairs brain isn't even connected to our downstairs brain. And this happens in our kids when something triggering happens. Sometimes if our kids are from a really hard place, they're kind of operating like this all the time. But when we can get them calm and they feel safe, their brains return to this. Our brains are really cool like that. They can come back to how they're supposed to be. But let's say something triggers them. There's a change. You have a kid in your home and they are calm, they're safe, but then there's a change in routine that feels unfamiliar, scary to them, or it reminds them of something that has happened before. And then they flip their lids. Their fear center starts working, it starts pumping, and it flips their lid. And then you're seeing behaviors, you're seeing things that you're like, what is going on? None of this makes sense. And we're trying to talk through it with them. What do we like to do as parents? We like to lecture, right? We like to, why are you doing this? Do it a different way. This isn't right, all those things. But the kids, are they going to be able to understand that if their lid is flipped? No, they can't understand it because they don't have access to their higher thinking brain right now. So a lot of what we're going to talk about in parenting kids from hard places is about reconnecting them. We have to calm them down and connect with them. We do this through connection, through relationship. We connect with them and help them feel safe, and then we can help them grow. We can help them learn. We can help them figure out what is going on. So that's kind of our flip your lid brain model. Hopefully that makes sense. But kids like to hear that too because it gives them words for what's going on. They can say, I flipped my lid right now. And we can talk about, putting it back together. So that's just kind of a fun thing right there. One note, I don't have a handout about this, but one note about secondary trauma, we just like to mention this. Sometimes when, this is not to scare you, but to prepare you, sometimes when we have kids in our home or when we work with people who come from hard places, their trauma and their trauma responses can traumatize us. So for example, Jake and I experienced this when our kids first came home. We went through the wildest, 8 months to a year where we just saw a lot of really hard things. And so now something will happen sometimes where maybe our kids say something or they start to respond in a certain way, and we then have a trauma response because immediately we're taken back to, those early days when things were really, really hard. And we think, oh no, we're going back down this whole, train of whatever. And then we can get really stressed out. And we're not thinking logically because we know that they've grown. We know that they've healed past a lot of that stuff, but our brains sometimes forget that, right? And so when we're caring for and seeing people from hard places, it can kind of trigger that in us. So we just need to watch out for that and make sure we're caring for ourselves. If your kids are dealing with some hard things, or maybe they've shared their trauma with you, which is really heavy, right? They've shared that with you. Make sure you're talking to somebody too, right? Whether that's a counselor or someone from our staff, if you need to sit down and talk, we would love to do that because we need to be taking care of ourselves as well. All right, next handout, TBRI principles. TBRI principles, it's got the little triangles on it. My printer started doing a weird thing with the ink, so some of them might be colored a little funny. TBRI is, we're gonna talk about what it is, but it's mainly what we use when we're parenting kids from hard places. Okay, here's what TBRI stands for. It stands for Trust-Based Relational Intervention. This is, we kind of already mentioned this, but we're talking about connection with our kids, right? And that's what helps them to grow and heal. And so what it is it's a holistic intervention that's been developed over the past decade. So it's looking at the whole child, not just a behavior. It's an evidence-based practice that meets the needs of the whole child. And it's an approach to caregiving that is developmentally respectful, responsive to trauma, and attachment-based, okay? So it's a lot about connection. We believe that is what is gonna move us forward, and it's evidence-based, so we've seen that in research that it is what helps our kiddos move forward who come from hard places. So let me explain these triangles really quick, and then I'm gonna tell you more about what it looks like to parent with TBRI. So you have two triangles. The triangle on the top is what we like to call typical parenting, right? This is probably how a lot of us were raised. It might be how we've raised our kids. And what it looks like is the bottom of that triangle, the biggest part of that triangle is correcting, right? So let's pretend you have a child who has a behavior. What do we start with? Usually we start with correction, right? Stop, don't do that, that's wrong, that's bad. We correct first. Then if we get through the correction with our child, we might empower them and say, what do you need? How can I help? And then if the children make it through that, we might get to the very tippy top of that triangle that is connection, right? If my child's not gonna listen to me and they're not going to follow my correction with a good attitude and then take care of whatever it is they needed, then we might never get to that tippy top connection piece because we're all frustrated. They're frustrated, we're frustrated, all of that. And we might not get to that connection piece, but that's the very top. With TBRI, basically what we are saying is we're gonna flip that on its head. We think that, especially with kids from hard places, we have to connect first, right? If our kids' lids are flipped, we have to connect with them and help them return to this state before we can empower, before we can correct. And so that's kind of how TBRI approaches this, that we're gonna connect with our kids. Once we've connected with them and we've made that connection, then we're gonna empower them. Do you need something? How can I help you? And then we're gonna correct. TBRI isn't saying we're never going to do consequences. We definitely need consequences still for behavior, but we have to connect with them first. So let me tell you what this looks like. Usually we watch an awesome video by Dr. Karen Purvis, who, we do have it? Oh, sweet. Yes, let's watch this one and then we'll skip the other one. So let's watch this one. So she wrote this book that you guys all got. She founded TBRI.
voice to a child is the very way that they know they're safe. The baby whimpers, I go quickly. We know that for a child who whimpers and the parent comes quickly, that child is far more likely to be secure in their attachment to that parent throughout their lifespan. And that happens in the first months of life. So for many of us, we bring home children who don't have voice. One of the most horrific stories that I've heard in the media 3 or 4 years ago, a woman in a Russian hospital with her own little baby heard muffled cries in the room next door. And she went next door to see what was the noise, and she opened the door, and as she looked in, she was horrified, went and got her cell phone, came back and took a picture, sold it to the Associated Press. Children who were in that particular hospital, who were in a wing that was designated for children that had been orphaned, who had been abandoned at birth. The nurses were trying to get them to quit crying, so they put duct tape over their mouths and plaster over the duct tape to teach the babies to stop crying. Well, tragically, we know from research that started by medical doctors and pediatricians here in this country in the 50s, that if you don't respond to a baby's cry, within 30 to 60 days, they stop crying. And so the gift that we want every parent to give every child is their voice. For the little one, it's a whimper or a cry. For the toddler, it may sound different. And for the older child that's learned to use their words, their voice may sound willful, belligerent. And so a child may say to me, "Give me that." And I might say, "Whoa, Nellie, try that again with good words, because you know what? I'm listening to you." So for every age, there's going to be a different manifestation. But the very fundamental precept of a child learning that they're safe, that they're loved, that they're cared for, that there's meaning in their life even, that they can change their life by asking for their needs appropriately, is giving voice. Giving voice to the orphan it's not just for the child that comes into your family. It's not just for the child that comes into your home and becomes part of your family. Giving voice is for everywhere that we go, in every work that we do with the children from the hard places. We know there are millions and millions of children in the world who need to be loved, who need to have voice. Very, very few of those children will ever have a family. So as we go to do ministries, giving voice can take practical form. For myself, when I go to work with the children, giving voice might be talking individually to that child and seeing if they'll let me hold their little hand, look in their eyes, or get a little chin prompt. Usually I'll have to work a long time to get that because they're not used to it. But the gift that I can leave that gives voice is to not only give my attention to that child while I'm there, but, for example, to do some type of work that nurtures the caregivers. Most of us that have been in orphanages know most caregivers were themselves orphans. And so what can I do for the orphanage caregiver to empower them, to help them be nurtured and healed, that they can continue to give care? Can I go in and, knowing a child needs sensory input, for example, can I go in and set up a sensory room that remains when I leave? For me, giving voice means to stop the bleeding as soon as we can. Can I go in and set up some kind of support system so that if that child has a grandmother or an aunt living, that child can be with a relative, that child's cries can be heard by someone who can be tender and care? Giving voice to the orphan can take as many different manifestations as there are children in the world. But when we do this work, and when we recognize God's call on us to meet the need of the orphan, we have to give voice in practical ways. And my hope is that we plant fruit that's not ephemeral, but that remains.
So these kids have often not been given a voice, right? A lot of what's happened in their life, they've had no say about. It's just happened to them. And so the simple things we can do to listen to them, even when she said, sometimes with an older kid, it sounds willful, belligerent. It sounds like yelling or arguing or being disrespectful, but we can stop and listen to them and then help them learn the skills to communicate better, right? So I love Dr. Karen Purvis. She has since passed away, but she has a lot of resources and videos online that are just so helpful. You can actually see her sometimes working with the kids, and the way that she does it is just so good. I've learned so much from her. She wrote this book. So basically, I'm going to spend like the next 10 minutes just kind of highlighting some of this TBRI stuff. But if you are going to be working with kids from hard places, I highly recommend that you read through this. Whether you're going to be a host family, a community coach, a ministry lead, maybe you're just going to mentor or help in that way. But this is going to give you tools in working with these kids. So I highly recommend you dive into that. But let's talk for a minute about, I think it's on the back side of your triangle sheet. We're going to talk about connecting, empowering, and correcting, these 3 principles. What does it actually mean to connect, to empower, and to correct? And I'll give you some practical examples, okay? So here's where it's going to get a little bit more, practical. Okay, so for connecting, when we are talking about connecting with our kids, we're talking about their attachment needs. We've seen in all these videos, right, that it is vital that our kids connect and have a healthy attachment with a safe adult, hopefully multiple safe adults. And so we want to build that. And even if we are not their biological parent, we can still build that connection with them, that attachment. So when we connect with kids from hard places, we eliminate fear and we build trust. That's what we're doing, okay? We're helping to bring down those walls of fear and build trust between us and them. So some quick ideas for connection are child-led play. Very simple, but playing with our kids. That builds connection probably quicker and easier than just about anything else. Even 5-10 minutes playing with them. Healthy touch is huge. A lot of the times our kids don't know what healthy touch looks like. And Karen even mentioned this, but sometimes we have to start really slow and go with whatever the kids are comfortable with, especially depending on their past or what has happened. But we can do hugs. Sometimes kids really are hungry for that and they haven't had that. But sometimes they're not ready for it or they don't want that, right? So we can do high fives, we can do fist bumps, we can do, if they're not even ready for that, like they don't want physical contact at all, we can just eye contact, I'm listening to you, I'm caring for you, that's important, right? Or mimicking what they're saying. So they are laughing, you laugh with them. They're smiling, you smile back at them. Those simple forms of connection can help building that trust. And then finally on there, it says giving the child a voice, which is, what Karen was talking about. But we just create opportunities for them to have choices and control in their life. Even if that is really simple things, right? Would you rather have mac and cheese or chicken nuggets for dinner? Let them have a choice. They haven't had a choice before probably. So giving them choice. And of course, we always pick choices that both options are good, right? But like, do you want to wear the blue shirt or the pink shirt today? What would you prefer? Would you rather brush your teeth first or put on your pajamas first? And helping give them some control over what's happening to them. So those are all ways we can connect with our kids. So when we talk about connecting first when there's something happening, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about taking a minute and looking your child in the eyes, listening to their voice, to what they're feeling. Maybe it's a hug. Maybe it's sitting next to them for a minute before we go into our correcting mode, right? So we want to connect with them. The second thing then is empowering. So once we've connected and we've let them know, hey, we're on your side, we're here for you, then we want to empower them. Empowerment is all about meeting the physical needs of your child. So a lot of times our kids from hard places don't recognize, this is kids in general, but especially from hard places, they don't recognize when they're feeling hungry, right? And so maybe their blood sugar is low and they start to get a little hangry and they don't know. Or maybe they need some water, or maybe they need sleep, or whatever it might be. And so it's our job as their caregivers and their adults to begin to notice what it is they need and provide them with that. So some quick ideas for empowering here is diet. We need to balance that blood sugar, make sure they're having protein, snacks, all that good stuff. Food is really important, especially a lot of these kids have food insecurity, meaning there's been times where they haven't had food when they needed it. And so they're very, very worried that they won't have food. And so we need to make sure that we are providing that for them. So after we've connected with them, then we can ask, hey, can I get you a snack? How about a drink of water? And sometimes that's enough to snap them out of whatever's happening, okay? Sleep, also making sure that they get plenty of sleep. We all need sleep, but especially when we saw in that video, when cortisol is high, that stress hormone, it's really hard to get sleep because we're so stressed and anxious. If you have anxiety, you have dealt with that probably. But we also know that we need more sleep because of that cortisol. So we're getting less and we need more of it. And so for our kids, we have to just really be mindful of how can we get them to sleep and make sure they are well rested. Activity is huge. You saw that exercise is one of the best ways to deal with that chronic stress. The same is true for our kids, okay? If they're in a very stressed situation, fight or flight, let's get them out doing big movements, okay? Because moving our body helps to release all of that. So taking a quick run with them, playing a game really quick that's going to get them moving is going to be really, really beneficial. Transitions, this is another thing. We want to prepare our kids for transitions, big or small. Really important with kids from hard places that we are, it could look like, hey guys, 5 more minutes of TV time and then it's gonna be bedtime, okay? Giving them just an idea of what's coming so that they know and are prepared. Sometimes it might be bigger, like maybe they're going to a new place, like they're going to a new school for the first time or a church for the first time, and we can arrange for them to maybe go see the church or see the school before the day of school so they can see it and feel it out. I know for our kids, when they had their first day of school, the day before, we woke up at the same time we would wake up for school, and we went through the entire routine, what it would look like to get up, get our uniforms on, get breakfast, all of those things, so that when the day came, they knew exactly what was coming, right? And it can help them not flip their lids, which is what we're trying to avoid. We don't want that to happen. So transitions are huge. Praise, I know Andrew was talking about this earlier, but just giving them as much affirmation and praise as we can. Like that was, wow, you got dressed so quickly, or you only complained a few times. Maybe that's the win, right? Maybe it took 20 minutes to get dressed instead of the 40 minutes it took the day before, right? That's huge. And we gotta praise them for that. Expectations. So this is really a really important piece when we're talking about kids from hard places. I know I said in TBRI, it's developmentally appropriate. So what we mean by that is when kids experience trauma, sometimes, let's say they're 8 years old, okay? In age, biologically, they are 8 years old. However, emotionally and mentally, they might be at a younger age because of the trauma that has happened to them. So they might be operating more like a 3-year-old in their behaviors. They might be operating more like at kindergarten level, mentally, educationally, than at whatever, an 8-year-old level. And so we just have to be aware. We like to expect things from kids, right? If you're 8, act like you're 8. Come on, you're 8 years old, you shouldn't be throwing a tantrum rolling around on the floor. But for our kids, that might be where they're at developmentally. And what the research tells us is that if a kid has missed certain milestones, right? Maybe it's that infant stage where they weren't held as much as they needed to be, or they weren't nurtured in certain ways. We have to go back to that stage that they missed and give them what they needed, which sometimes, let me tell you, looks really silly because you've all seen my 10-year-old. He is as tall as Jake, but sometimes he needs to be held. And that's okay because that's what he needs for his developmental level. And we're helping to get him back to where he needs to be. And this is true for all kids, I'm not just picking on him, but we have to be okay with meeting those needs. Sometimes, what happens when you're a little kid, like a baby? How do you get fed? Huh? Crying? You cried, right? And then who feeds you? Your parent, your caregiver, whoever that is. So sometimes we've seen this in kids too, where maybe feeding them, which looks crazy when you've got a 6-year-old. But these are the developmental milestones that they missed out on as kids, and we get to build that connection with them and that safety, that attachment by saying, I'm gonna meet your needs. And then they can move on. So we just want to have developmental expectations, developmentally appropriate expectations of our kiddos. it might not be the age, their like chronological age. So just be aware of that it might look a little different, and that's okay. Just tell yourself, this is what I have to tell myself sometimes, that correction, but we have to just be really mindful when we do it, right? One thing I will note this now, but we do not believe in TBRI, but also in MVM. There's no kind of physical punishment for our kiddos. This is not saying that this was like if you were spanked or you chose to spank, I'm not saying, oh my gosh, you're terrible. That's totally fine. But with our kids from hard places, the way that they can interpret a spank or any kind of physical correction might be way, way different than a well-adjusted child who knows that you love them and knows that you care for them might. And so we just ask that all of our families refrain from that in any way with any kiddos that you are hosting. So no physical correction, but there's a lot of ideas for correction. So you have a handout that says the ideal approach at the top. And this is going to give you some tips for when you're correcting your children, okay? It's an acronym. So each one stands for something. And then we are almost done with TBRI, and then we'll just kind of talk about next steps. So you guys have almost made it all the way through. I know we're getting a little sleepy probably, but okay, the I stands for, if you want to write these down, the I stands for immediate. Immediate. So when we are correcting our children, we want it to be immediate, okay? Our kids from hard places have a hard time remembering what has happened, and so we want to address it as quickly and as soon as we can. Immediate. The D is direct. So when we're correcting, we don't want to be yelling across the house, which I'm definitely guilty of. Ideally, we want to be looking at them, maintaining eye contact, and modeling how you want them to respond, right? We want our kids to respond to us when we talk with eye contact, not talking, looking right at us, and so we need to model that for our kids. So we want to be direct. E is efficient. So what we mean by efficient is that we want to respond to low-level behaviors in a low-level way. And we want to respond to high-level behaviors in a high-level way. So Karen, her other video kind of talks about this. The book also talks about it a lot, but it's this idea that she talks about playful engagement. So when possible, when there's a behavior or an issue, if we can keep it playful with our kids, we have a better chance of returning them back to equilibrium quicker, okay? So example, kids running in the house. They know not to run in the house. We've told them not to run in the house. Instead of immediately going towards, don't run in the house. Why are you running? You know not to run. Instead, I could say, did I just hear running feet or were those walking feet? You hear how my voice is a little bit different? It's just more playful and interactive. Then they can go, oh, darn it, I forgot. Sorry, Mom, here's my walking feet. Sometimes it might still be willful and disobedient. They might be like, I don't know, or well, I'm gonna run because I wanna run. And then we have to up the ante a little bit, okay? So we've tried playful engagement, now I'm gonna be more serious. You know that we cannot run in the house. I've asked you that before. Please do not run. Maybe they go a little bit further, right? And then we're going to have to be more and more stern as we go. You will not run in the house. I need you to stop and look at me right now. So your voice is going to increase. What is acceptable is going to get smaller and smaller, okay? But we like to start with the playful engagement because if we can stop them there, then it doesn't feel like we had an issue. There was no break in connection. We were able to just turn it around and keep going. So we want to be efficient. Start with a low-level response if it's a low thing and move our way up. A is action-based. So what we mean by this, I'm actually going to give you some examples here in a minute, but we want to create body memories. So we want our kids to have a chance to redo things the right way because their body and brain will then remember it that way. Okay? I'll tell you what this looks like in just a minute. And then L is leveled at behavior. Leveled at behavior. So what this means is we want our correction to be at the behavior, right? Not at the child. We love you. We think you're an amazing kid. Nothing will ever change that. This behavior is unacceptable, right? There's no shame. There's no... Sometimes with our kids from hard places, we have to actually say those words and remind them that I'm not leaving you. I still love you. And we think they know that. They should know that, right? Because we've never said anything different. But sometimes we do have to give those reminders. This is about the behavior. It's not about you. So, okay, that's the ideal approach. Back to our list here. Here's some ideas for correcting and some of those body memory things. Redos. That's a really easy thing where we can keep it playful. The running feet. Remember, we can say, oh, let's try that again. Let's try it again. And they rewind. And then they walk with walking feet, okay? And then it's like, excellent. You did the right thing, and you did it, and now your body and your brain can remember how to use walking feet instead of running feet. Compromises. This is another one to help give your kids a voice. So sometimes if they're arguing with us, we can ask, hey, do you want to ask for a compromise? And what this looks like is we teach our kids that, you know what, at any point in time, you can ask me for something different. So if I say we're having orange juice for breakfast, you can say, Mom, can I have a compromise? And if I am able to say yes, here's the deal. If I'm able to say yes to the compromise, I will say yes. But if I say no, we're going to respect that and do what I've asked, right? But you can always ask for it. You can always ask for a compromise. So maybe I say we're having orange juice for breakfast, and they say, oh, Mom, can I get a compromise? Or maybe they whine a little bit, and I say, do you want to ask for a compromise? You know, give them the little reminder. Can I have a compromise? I had leftover chocolate milk from yesterday. I really want that. Can I please have the chocolate milk? Yes, you can have the chocolate milk, right? It's not the end of the world. It's something I can agree to that's going to help give them a voice and feel empowered. Sure. But maybe they say, Mom, can I go grab a can of Mountain Dew? And I'm going to say, I cannot say yes to that because of caffeine or because of whatever, you know? But thank you for asking for a compromise. But most of the time we say yes to them, and then that helps them to kind of find those words for, instead of throwing a fit, what is it that I really want to ask for? What is it that I need right now? Choices, we already talked about that, but that's a super simple thing you can do to give your kids power. Would you like this or this? And let them choose. Life script, so if you read through The Connected Child, there's tons of like little phrases that you can even post in your home that help your kids, once you teach them what it means, it helps them to know exactly what to do. For example, one of them is with respect. That's one of the phrases that they use in here, and we use it in our home all the time. So we'll say, try again, with respect. And as soon as you say that, after doing this for a while, they'll know what you mean. They'll know that I need to use kinder words. I need to use a softer tone of voice, and they'll do it, okay? So that is another one. Time in. So we don't do timeouts with our kids from hard places because there's nothing wrong with timeouts, but with our kids from hard places, it communicates separateness. I can't be with you. You're too much for me right now. I can't handle your behaviors. And the issue with this is that our kids already feel scared. When they're having behaviors, they feel scared. They feel out of control. They can't control what's happening. And so we have to show them how to regulate, which the next one there says self-regulation. So self-regulation, we can all do as well-adjusted adults, right? When I'm getting angry or frustrated or upset, I know how to calm myself down. Do I always do it? Maybe not, but I know how. Our kids do not know how to self-regulate. So what we do in the meantime is we co-regulate. This means I'm going to model for them what it looks like to regulate. I'm going to sit with them and maybe put an arm around them if they're okay with it. And I'm going to say, usually when this happens to me, I like to take deep breaths. Do you want to take some deep breaths with me? Deep breaths, whatever it might be, right? We model it for them until they're able to do it alone. And then the last thing right there, oh, I forgot to say, so instead of timeouts, we do time-ins where we sit with them or you sit close to them. Sometimes when our kiddos have been maybe too violent to be sitting with them, sometimes we have to shut the door. They're sitting in the room, we shut their door, I sit right outside the door. I'm right here. As soon as you're calm and you want to talk, I'm right here for you. And so that's not to say that, you can never have the kids sit somewhere separately if they're, maybe a danger to you or to kids around them or they're making bad choices. We can have them sit separately, but don't go so far that they don't know where you are. We want you to still feel like you're with them and you're not leaving them, okay? HALT, checking if your kids are hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Just another little acronym to help you check in and see like, hey, how are they doing? Okay, last thing here is our goals of discipline. Oh my goodness, I just shut my whole thing. Our goals of discipline are, hold on a second, guys, I'm so sorry, I just shut this. here's what we want to happen when we're done disciplining our kids. I don't think you guys have this anywhere, so I'm really sorry about that. Number one, ask yourself, am I more connected to my child? So when you're done with that whole process, you should feel more connected to your child. Number two, have they gained competency? Meaning, have they learned new skills? Have they learned that maybe next time when I feel this way, I should try getting a snack? Maybe I was hungry. Or maybe next time I should take some deep breaths or whatever. So have they learned? And number three, do they know that they are loved, pursued, and precious? Have I left that interaction letting them know that I love them and nothing will ever change that? Okay, so those are our goals of discipline. All right, that was so much that I just threw out at you. What questions do you have about TBRI, parenting kids from hard places, any of that? Yes, yep, all of that is covered in the book. There's actually a more in-depth training on TBRI that is offered in the spring that we're actually trying to get a grant to cover that for any of our volunteers who want to attend that and get a more like in-depth training. Jake and I have both been, and it is awesome. But yes, this book is an awesome place to start. Any other questions? Thoughts on TBRI, any of that? Okay, well, let's talk next steps, and then we'll be done. You should have a thing in here that says next steps, and this will kind of talk about where we go from here. So first and foremost, it says, we just want you guys to know how grateful we are for you spending your time here with us, praying about, thinking about how to be involved with My Village Ministries. We really believe that it is going to change our community and the way that we can love on these families. So thank you so much. We just want to know like how you're feeling, where you want to serve, what you're thinking about. So we gave you a little recap. We've actually expanded on it of the roles in which you can serve. So the next two pages in your packet should say MVM roles. It's front and back. You don't have to read these all right now because I know that can be a little bit, there's a lot there. But basically it goes through each of our MVM roles and it tells you kind of what the responsibilities for that role are. And you might make a great host family so it kind of shows you some of the skills or things necessary to be each of those roles. So we would just ask that you guys take those home, that you pray over it, that you look over it, or you can do it here even before you leave. And think about what might be the right fit for you. I'm just gonna highlight them super briefly and then you guys can read about them more later. Our ministry lead, so Kenzie mentioned this earlier, but our ministry lead can be one person, but ideally it's a team of 2 to 4 people in each My Village Ministries church, and they kind of take on the responsibility of, I am gonna communicate the vision of MVM to our church. I am gonna look for volunteers in our church. Anytime there's a hosting, they're the ones who are reaching out to the care community in their church saying, guys, let's get meals together. Guys, let's offer to babysit and all that kind of stuff. So that is kind of the role of a ministry lead. Like Kenzie said, we have to have a ministry lead in every church before it can be an MVM church. So right now, Heart City is an MVM church. It's our only MVM church that is fully operational. Grace Fellowship Church, Avenue Church, and Potter's House Church are all churches that are in the process of finding these roles so that they can be a fully MVM church. So we need at least one person to be a ministry lead, the point person for the ministry in the church. The next role is the host family. So the host family we've talked a lot about already today, so we won't spend a ton of time, but they're the people who actually host the kids in their home. We need at least one host family in every MVM church as well. The community coach, so they provide coaching, encouragement, and mentoring to the referring parents, and they also support the host family during a hosting. That is what our community coach does. If you want to be a community coach moving forward, there is some more training that kind of goes into that to help you feel really equipped in that regard. Our care community, this is the wraparound support for the host family. So this is anyone who's interested in babysitting, bringing meals, bringing clothes, helping transport kiddos, things like that, that can help wrap around the host family. A mentor, so we are actually working on developing a mentorship program right now that will mentor school-aged kids. And this could be emotional, social development type mentoring, but it could also be tutoring and things like that. So if that's something you're interested in, we would love to talk to you about that. Another volunteer position that we don't necessarily have right now, but moving forward, we will probably do this as we have more calls coming in. We'll have referral line volunteers who will answer our referral line when people call in. And you can be that first person who kind of talks to the people, makes them feel heard and loved. You write down a quick report, and then you'll send it to our staff, and then we'll talk about, like, is this a good fit or not? So those are kind of some of the ways you can serve. We also have a prayer team that's actually not on this list, but it's on the other list, a prayer team, or maybe you feel called to be a financial partner with MVM. So those are also possibilities. So those are kind of some of the roles. So here is your next step. If you're like, all right, what happens next? Next step, Kenzie, who is our director of admin, she is amazing, already sent you guys out an email, the email you registered with. She sent you out an email of a quick little survey that you can fill out. You can even do it right here before you leave if you want, so you don't forget. And then if you have questions, we can answer it. But it just kind of asks you, like, hey, what are you interested in doing? Are you interested in being a host family? Are you interested in being on the care team, a ministry lead, whatever it might be? And then as soon as we get those responses, we'll be working during this next week to get you guys the paperwork or answer your questions or whatever you need, depending on which role you would like to fill. If you would like to be a host family, this list kind of, the next couple pages actually kind of give you an idea of what you will need to do. There's like a short online training for you to do. You have to do this like little registration online that doesn't take too long. We have to get really intense background checks because this is in-home care for kids, right? It's still less stringent than foster care, but we need a full BCI and FBI fingerprinting check. So we'll send you details for that. We need a pastoral reference. We need a personal reference. We need you to fill out a child abuse registry. We need your driving record, which is only $5 for you to request. And then we need a copy of your driver's license and auto insurance. So once you've done all of that stuff, if you want to be a host family, once you've done all that, then we will reach out to you and say, all right, we are ready to schedule your home assessment. During the home assessment, you can see there's the last page, I think, is the home safety checklist. Those are some of the things we're looking for when we come. Again, it's less stringent than foster care, but we are looking for safety things. Do you have, what are they called? Smoke detectors. I couldn't think. Smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors. Do you have a safe place for the kids to sleep? We're pretty flexible, honestly, on what that looks like. It doesn't have to look like, do the kids have their own bedroom with a whole setup? We just need a safe place for them to sleep, okay? So we're pretty flexible on that. We want to make sure there's no hazardous materials or, crazy safety concerns. If we have guns or things like that, we have to make sure they're locked up. So those are some considerations. That's kind of what that will look like. So we'll come into your home, we will do the home assessment, we'll walk around, make sure the safety stuff is good, and then we just chat with you for like 30 minutes to an hour, depending on the conversation, just asking you about what would be a good fit for you as far as hosting, answering any questions you have, hearing a little bit of your background, and things like that. And then once that is complete, you are an official host family. So that's kind of what that looks like. That is the one that has probably the most that goes with it, is the host family. But like I said, Kenzie will send you all the details on next steps for whatever you're interested in. But I've talked a lot. So what questions do you have about next steps? Anything MVM related? Now's your time. That's awesome. You could be a mentor if you're interested in mentoring. That's absolutely something you could do. We would love to have college students mentor, and we'll just set up that program with whatever kid you get connected with. We'll set that up specifically for when you're here. That is one way that you could participate. We're having a fundraiser during Christmas. That's like a big fundraiser before college students go home. So volunteering for that would be huge. That would be so helpful to us. Kenzie's back there like, please, please come help us. Even if you want to rally some friends to come help us, that would be awesome. That would be awesome. What else, Kenzie? Am I missing anything? Being a prayer partner, you could be part of our care community too if you wanted to. Of course, you can only do that while you're here, but babysitting, that would be huge for our families who are hosting, offering them like a night out, right? Or helping with some tutoring, or maybe you want to bake some cookies and bring them over. Things like that would be also something our college students could definitely invest in and would be so helpful. Yeah, good question. What else? I know I talked too long because my throat is super dry now. I'm going to pass these around too for you guys to look at, just so you get an idea. I should talk in the microphone so people online can hear me. These are our brochures. So we have one that goes to our referring agencies that we set out so that parents who might be in crisis can look at it and be like, oh, I could call my village ministry. So if you want to just look at that. And then we have one that goes to our MVM churches. So once you're an official MVM church, we'll put a bunch of these brochures there. And it gives all the different ways that you can help and support and get involved, which is pretty cool. So all right, any other questions? Okay, awesome. Hopefully that means we answered your questions while we were going through it, or everyone's just hungry and wants to go to lunch, which I totally understand. So if you guys don't mind, I'm just gonna pray for us really quick to close this out, and then you are free to go. Dear Jesus, thank you so much for the ministry of My Village. God, we're just so thankful for you leading us to this. We're thankful that you inspired this in the hearts of people who desired to see families kept together and united and loved on like Jesus would love on them. God, I just pray that you would stir in our hearts. God, would you lead us to exactly how you want us to serve in this ministry? And would we be just obedient to respond and say, yes, Father? I just pray that you would push the mission of My Village so much further than we ever could. God, would you just multiply our efforts, Father? We trust you to do exactly what you want to do here in Mansfield. God, we're so thankful. Thank you for these people who came here and spent their Saturday with us. God, would you just bless them and bless their sacrifice? In Jesus' name I pray, amen. All right, you guys are free to go. Let us know if you have other questions or if you need help accessing that email with that survey. Remember to fill that out. And I think that's all I have for you. In an email, whatever email you use to register, it will be in that email. If you need help figuring that out, Kenzie can help you figure that out.